Hey guys.
When are we actually starting?
Welcome to the first episode of our podcast. We've wanted to do something like this for a little while now. We've been talking about it, and now we're starting. It really means a lot that you have decided to check us out. If you like it, it would mean a lot if you showed it to other people, maybe tell someone about it, but don't feel pressured. If it's bad, don't worry about it. I'm here with some of my friends, Kevin and Owen, and we are going to talk about some movies today.
Owen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi.
Anyway, hello.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about our 5 favorite movies of the year today. We're going to be going in depth about Avatar: The Way of Water, and then afterwards we're going to go in depth about Babylon. But we're going to start before our 5 favorite movies by naming some honorable mentions that are movies that we just appreciate from this year that didn't make our top 5, maybe some movies that were underseen that we think more people should watch. And we're going to start with Doug's honorable mention first. Just one, whatever one you want to start with.
Just one honorable mention.
We'll go back and forth.
Yeah, so a movie that we're not going to mention today that I would feel really bad if was never brought up when we're talking about end of the year stuff is Mad God, Phil Tippett's life work, the movie he spent 30 years making, and it really shows. It's a really great movie, my favorite theater experience of the year, maybe, other than another movie that we're going to talk about. Yeah, this movie, it rules. Yeah.
My first honorable mention is the movie I just rewatched recently, and that's Steven Soderbergh's Kimi, which was on HBO Max, like straight to streaming movie, and I think it has some of the best directing of the year and a really strong Zoe Kravitz performance that I really liked.
My first honorable mention is the Banshees of Inisherin because
Banshees of Inisherin.
Because I gave out 6 5-star ratings this year, and only 5 of them could make our top 5. So I have to give a shout out to this movie because it means a whole lot to me. I think it's a great examination of depression, although there's a movie in my top 5 that is a better examination of depression. But we'll get into that later.
Bro's power scaling depression.
Yeah, exactly.
Another movie that I wanted to do an honorable mention of is 3,000 Years of Longing. A movie that I am ridiculously monumentally high on. I think this is such a beautiful look into like love through stories and like the love of stories, and it's just it touched me somewhere really deep inside of my body, you know. And I kind of like this movie even more than Mad Max Fury Road. But yeah, so
really?
that's another one I needed to bring up for sure.
My 6th ranked movie of the year just missed the spot because it got knocked off today. Was Zach Cregger's Barbarian, which was one of my the biggest surprise of the year for me. And I really liked Justin Long was like phenomenal. The whole cast is really interestingly casted in the movie, and I really enjoyed that movie this year.
Yeah, I think there's a conversation to be had about Justin Long getting awards attention, but we know
comedy performances don't get looks like that. But I think he's brilliant in the movie. I think that whole cast is brilliant, and I think it's a great addition to 2022.
Yeah, I was going to put Barbarian on my list, but I figured somebody else was going to mention it. The next movie on my list is Hustle, starring Adam Sandler. Probably...
And Anthony Edwards.
Don't forget Anthony Edwards.
Anthony Edwards is a scene stealer. But yeah, this is just an honorable mention I want to make because I am a big basketball fan. It has really nothing to do with how good the movie is. Because if you like basketball movies, this is like the pinnacle of how to make basketball look good in a movie.
Another movie I would be remiss if I didn't mention in our honorable mention spot is Deep Water, directed by Adrian Lyne. Barely. Listen. I have a soft spot for Miss Ana de Armas in my heart. Okay, and I think Ben Affleck is also an interesting guy. This movie is a lot of fun. I think it's maybe the most overhated movie of the year. It's Adrian Lyne's return to form. It would be his return to form, I guess, if the movie was good. But so yeah, I had to bring that one up because no one else is going to be talking about Deep Water.
I think another one of the most overhated movies of the year is Rob Zombie's The Munsters.
Fuck yeah!
Yeah, I think that movie is a total blast. I got it on Blu-ray. I've seen it a couple times already. A really fun PG Rob Zombie movie about the monsters. The hate is really weird, but yeah, that movie's a lot of fun.
No, Rob Zombie's The Munsters is like one of the funniest first watches of the year, dude. That
Oh,
movie's
yeah.
so silly and just so happy. It's like best Halloween movie. That was such a fun Halloween.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's lit really fun, and like all the lighting decisions are really funny. They came to him and he was like, I want to do it in black and white, and they were like, no, and then he lit it like the craziest lighting ever, and I think that's so fun.
yeah.
There's no good way to make this transition as somebody who hasn't seen the monsters. But my next movie is the school shooting trauma movie, The Fallout.
Another comedy. Second funniest
yeah.
movie of the year.
Yeah.
Shout out Jenna Ortega.
Yeah, The Fallout's just a movie I want to mention because Jenna Ortega is very, very famous at the moment, and it's for Wednesday, which is a good show. But The Fallout is, at least up to this point, Jenna Ortega's best performance. So I feel like people should be talking about it some more. And also, jokes aside, the subject matter is like very serious, and it does a very good job exploring it from the perspective of people who actually have to deal with the trauma of these events. So I think more people should watch it if they can handle the subject matter.
Speaking of more people should watch it if they can handle the subject matter, this is a locomotive. We don't stop. Ambulance, directed by Michael Bay. Honorable mention. Just missed my list. This movie is incredible. You need to do yourself a service. One night, right? Vibes are chill. Get yourself a nice dinner, sit on the couch, throw on Ambulance, have the most fun 2 hours of your life, basically. It's this movie's incredible.
Yeah, Ambulance rocks. I know that one amongst us is an Ambulance hater, but Ambulance
okay.
is so much
Hater
fun.
is a little strong.
Okay.
I
well,
did-
we know it
I-
wouldn't make your honorable mentions. That's
I
what we know.
did fall asleep during Ambulance and haven't finished
That's
it yet.
crazy. Falling asleep during Ambulance is crazy because that movie is like on Adderall and like throughout like it's like taking lines of coke. That movie is insane.
I'm willing to return to Ambulance eventually because I know I have to do my Michael Bay round trip when I get to that. But a movie I did not fall asleep during is Owen Klein's Funny Pages, which is
the transition is great.
often gets talked about as a Safdie's produced film, which I think, yeah, they're big names, but I think Owen Klein deserves all the credit here for his big directorial debut. It follows a young comic book maker trying to figure it out on his own, and it's a lot of fun. It's very dark. Another big surprise for me this year.
Yeah, this movie is not super high on my list, but I wanted to shout out good luck to you, Leo Grand, because I think it is one of the best scripts of the year. It is just so sharply written. There is like tons of great comedic moments. There is so much chemistry between the two leads, and they're both really, really good in it. And yeah, I think more people should watch it. It also starts a really interesting conversation. I won't get into details, but the topic of conversation in this movie is definitely explored in an interesting way. And I think more people would want to talk about it if they knew what it was.
For my last honorable mention pick, I'm going to shout out Top Gun Maverick, baby. Starring Tom Cruise, directed by Joseph Kosinski, who I would say is maybe the most underrated director in Hollywood. Underappreciated director may be a better term.
Wow.
Well, that's actually crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
whatever.
that's high. That's very high praise there.
Whatever.
Oh, my.
The movie's really good. The movie's really good. Obviously, everyone and their mom has seen it. I saw it twice in theaters. I had a blast. That movie's amazing. For Mission Impossible heads like me, right? It's like this is a little taste before Dead Reckoning comes out next year. You know?
I'm surprised it did not make your list. You're really big on that movie. My last honorable mention is Kyle Edward Ball's Skinamarink. That movie was really big on the internet this year. yeah, you are in Skinamarink right now.
I'm in Skinamarink right now.
Yeah, I think the movie's a lot of fun. It's really interesting, and I think it being really popular is really a good movie to be popular to push and kind of introduce people into more in like non-mainstream, non-linear kind of things. And I think they can get them into some really good stuff. I mean, that is really important for that. Yeah.
I feel so bad that we went from Top Gun Maverick to Skinamarink. That is like the craziest.
Yeah, I mean the scale in
you-
terms of budget
Hey,
and
man.
box office.
You put
is-
Top Gun Maverick as your underrated movie, so I don't
The
know
most
what to tell
like literally, I don't think there's any two more like polar opposite movies than those two
Yeah.
movies.
you. Yeah, hey, those are the cards I got.
So I'm just gonna rattle off.
Yeah,
the
keep going. Just pop 'em out.
Fire Island, really, really cute romance, really, really funny. That one.
We
I
love the
really
gays.
recommend. It's on. Yeah,
Shout
exactly.
out.
It's on Hulu. Everybody should watch it. Emily the Criminal. Aubrey Plaza enjoyers.
We love the
are gonna
gays.
Love this one. Aubrey Plaza is amazing in this. It's not the role that you maybe would typically expect Aubrey Plaza to be in, but really cool anti-capitalist filmmaking. You love to see it. The Wonder is Florence Pugh's best movie this year. Everybody should watch that. I think it's a much better performance than Don't Worry, Darling, but there's no need to compare. And then On the Count of Three is my last honorable mention. This is a movie that I am very passionate about, and I think it says a lot of good things to move forward the conversation of suicide and mental health awareness. Maybe not everybody agrees with me, but I think it at least starts some good
It
conversations.
says a lot about society.
Yeah.
And actually, before we move on, I just need to for half a second. We have to mention Triple R because nobody else mentioned Triple R.
yeah.
We have to mention
That's right,
RRR,
that's
directed by SS Rajamouli. Yeah. Obviously, that's on Netflix. So you have to go watch it. And I also wanted to throw out there, and I also needed to mention Triangle of Sadness as well.
Yeah.
Before we moved on,
Okay.
that's another
Yeah,
good movie.
I left Triangle of Sadness off my list because I guess I didn't like it as much as everybody else did, but I do think it's a movie that everybody should go watch.
Yeah.
And I just watched RRR for the first time, like literally 2 days ago, and
Yeah.
was very much blown away, which I saw it in theaters.
RRR
but
is on Netflix, so
It is, yeah.
definitely should check it out. I don't know if Triangle of Sadness is streaming though, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess that exhausts our list of honorable mentions. So we could start back up with Doug and get to our top 5 here, starting with your number 5, Doug.
My 5th favorite movie of the year is Crimes of the Future, directed by David Cronenberg. This movie's really good. It's a movie I actually think about really often. And when I saw it for the first time in theaters, I was really blown away by the subject matter, knowing that he wrote this movie like 40 years ago and has just been sitting on the script. Because the subject matter feels so like trans-coded and like queer-coded and like really like even kind of COVID coded if you want to read it like that. That's an annoying way to read it though. It just feels like a very today movie. Like it feels like a movie with DNA in it and like 2020 like blood in its veins, and that was really surprising to me. And also I think that like Kristen Stewart is one of like the most interesting and unique performances of the year. She's so brilliant. She's a little sick weirdo in that movie. And I think that like the way the movie is shot and like the practical effects and even kind of like the CGI guts, I think are all like really, really interesting. And like there's just so much to unpack in that movie. I'm a big, big fan of Crimes of the Future.
Yeah, I really like Crimes of the Future. I almost actually just brought it up for an honorable mention, but I knew you were gonna have it there.
Yeah, and I was going to mention the Kristen Stewart performance, but I'm glad you because I'm a
great.
huge Kristen Stewart fan, but I believe we all are. So
Yeah, shout out
yeah,
K
Kristen
Stu.
Stewart rocks.
Let's get K-Stu on the podcast.
Yeah, Kristen Stewart, friend of the pod. Come on whenever you like.
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about. I'd love to talk about Underwater.
and-
Oh, I
Yeah,
still have
yeah.
to watch Underwater.
We'll do an underwater episode with Kristen Stewart.
That would be so
Yeah,
much
There
fun.
you go. Come tune in for that one. My 5th movie of the year is Jordan Peele's Nope. That I really fell in love with that movie early on this year when it came out. I saw it a couple times in theaters. We've got a lot of movies about spectacle this year, whether they are spectacles or, in this case, about spectacles and a spectacle. And I think I really fell in love with the colors of this movie. You get a lot of really interesting blues. I think Daniel Kaluuya has this really great Scorpion King orange sweatshirt. Steven Yeun has the red jacket. I really
It's a Scorpion
love...
King like cast members.
Yeah. You get
it's-
the sweatshirt. Yeah, you get the staff on the back, the crew in the back, and there's a lot of interesting shirts as well. That was just I really fell in love with just the little details and design of this movie. Even with the big, what is it called again? It has a name, but it's whatever it's called. The big monster guy has a
Jean
really
Jacket. Jean
yeah,
Jacket.
Jean Jacket has a really interesting design, and I think this movie is really interestingly designed, and like the detail I fell in love with, and yeah, that's my 5th movie of the year.
Yeah. I won't go into detail at the moment, but I happen to also be a nope enjoyer of sorts. My number 5 is Tar. This movie was my number 2 for a while, but recent events have bumped it down the list a little bit. Maybe in the future that'll change because Tar is just like this movie that for me, I feel like, and I know Doug agrees with this, but for a lot of people, it seems like the discourse around this movie was that it was really boring and long. And for me, this was like the most glued to a screen I've been for a 2.5 hours worth of movie, at least in like recent memory. Obviously, Kate Blanchett is amazing, and I don't even really need to go into that performance because she's going to get all of the recognition that she deserves for it. But yeah, it's just so gripping to me. I think it explores so many interesting things in a way that I haven't seen them explored before. Obviously, it's much bigger than just the great like cancel culture movie that people are talking about it being. But if we're even just talking about cancel culture alone, there's nothing that has even come close to exploring it the way that Tar does. I think it presents a lot of interesting stuff about it, and you can literally, based on experience, I know, have a 3-hour conversation about just one scene in the movie. Like, there's so much to be picked apart. I just think it is a movie that I want to rewatch over and over again. And yeah, I love Tar.
Yeah, to continue talking about Tar, because that's my number 3 movie of the year. So it's not the next one on my list, but that's my number 3 movie of the year. I'm super high on that movie. I'm shocked that there's 2 movies I like more than Tar, because I think it's actually such a absolutely like genius level timeless cinema. It's like one of those things where like Todd Field with this movie alone kind of like has like surged himself into like, you know, one of the best living filmmakers basically with this movie. It's like every single frame can be dissected and picked apart, and like all of the messages and like the themes are super intricate, because it's like, yeah, it's about cancel culture, but it's also about like power dynamics, and it's also about like people you trust and family, and and even kind of like the patriarchy. It's a really interesting, dense movie, and it's really kind of perfect. So yeah, that's my number 3 pick. My number 4 movie is Decision to Leave, made by another genius, certified genius filmmaker, Park Chan-wook, as Sean Fennessy says. That movie is amazing. I love Decision to Leave. My take on Decision to Leave is actually it's like Vertigo, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, but better.
Oh.
It's one of the most
That is
well.
high praise. That is a lot.
It's one of, yeah, but it's like one of the most like how do I put it? It's one of the most visually inventive movies I've seen this whole year. No, it is the most visually inventive movie I've seen this year. It's one of the most visually inventive movies I've seen in a long time. It's like the way that he uses the camera in ways that like nobody has ever used the camera before is just fascinating. Park Chan-wook is just operating on a whole different level. He's like on a class on his own in terms of like the technical filmmaking.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement about Decision to Leave in terms of how technically great of a movie it is, and I think maybe it is worth revisiting, especially because Doug loves it so much. But yeah,
I'd
I
also
don't
like to
know.
revisit it.
I mean, that's certainly on my list. It doesn't make my top 5, but like that movie is really good, and I feel like now that I know how it ends without getting into spoilers, I think I could maybe appreciate it more upon a rewatch, because I think maybe I'll connect with it more knowing how effective the ending is and how emotional it is.
My 4th film of the year is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like fantasy is probably my favorite genre. Del Toro's like one of my favorite directors. I'm not like the biggest animation person, but this is like one of my favorites. I really like this movie. It's a really emotional story, and I think Del Toro again is one of the best working directors today. And I'll watch anything he does, and this is one of my favorites from him. And I think it's very it's funny because this movie is a Netflix movie, and it got like a limited release at theaters, and it was a really weird thing, but I feel like I'm really happy that it's been getting the praise that it's been getting, because I think it's a really strong entry, and I love to see Del Toro kind of keep going in this stop motion like direction of his career, because I think that'd be a really interesting latter half.
Yeah, Pinocchio's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
The Pinocchio
Yeah.
fucking rules.
That's another movie with really neat design of even like the creatures and the characters that I really like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an animated movie enjoyer, despite what Doug spreads about me.
Yeah.
I happen to love animated movies, and yeah, Pinocchio is like one of the coolest animated movies I've seen in terms of like design. And I am not going to say much about my number 4 pick, because number 4 on my list is Avatar: The Way of Water. We're going to get into that in a little while. So I'm just going to pass it over to Doug for his next pick. Although yours is Tar, correct?
Tar. Yes.
Yeah.
So my third, as I referenced before, my third favorite movie of the year is Tar. I already talked about it as really good movie, and I'm gonna use this time to filibuster and say everybody should watch Tar. This movie made no money.
Yeah.
Like nobody saw this movie in theaters. The movie like lost a bunch of money. It's one of the most amazing movies ever made, kind of. In terms of like, it's like top 1,000 movies ever made, I should say. You know what I mean? Like,
Putting aside Owen for a second, the Tar haters are lame. Like, this movie deserves to make some money. Like, if you guys hate on Tar, you are lame and you just don't get it.
yeah. Hashtag Tarcast. Everybody at Owen on Twitter and tell him that he's lame for not liking Tar.
My number 3 I watched today, and that's Skolimowski's EO, which is the donkey movie that no one's seen. And I think it's a lot of fun. I can't wait for actual people, like more people to see it. Basically, I watched some interviews before this, and he was kind of tired of the structure of narrative filmmaking and wanted to do more interesting things. So he decided, let's make the main character an animal, because then we're going to get less dialogue. And there isn't not much dialogue in the movie. You'll have, there's people in the movie that talk, but the main character does not talk. And I think it's really fascinating because it's an hour-and-a-half movie, and your main character is a donkey. And the movie is shot in 4:3, and so you have this kind of a lot of close-ups with EO, and it's a very emotional film. And I think it's brilliant, and it's one of the most interesting and innovative films of 2022.
I'm super hyped to watch EO.
Yeah, same.
I'm
very much
excited to talk
for
more
it.
about you with the film because we both haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I can't wait because I also haven't seen Alhazard Balthazar. I butchered that title. I know I had it, but that's like the other donkey movie that a lot of people are comparing EO to. So when EO comes out on VOD, so I can see it, I want to do like a double feature of both those movies, and then we could have a real discussion about it.
Yeah. Skolimowski is very influenced from that film. I have not seen that film though, but in his interview he talked about watching it and crying and he said he went to the movie going to criticize the movie because it was like on some list. It was number 1 and his movie was number 2. So he went to go see the movie and he wanted to criticize it. He wanted to not like it, and he ended up crying and bawling at the end. So he's a big fan of that movie, and he is inspired by that movie to make this movie. I think EO is one of the best movies of the year.
I want to throw out there, because you referenced how the movie is in 4:3 and how that's like a really like great creative decision. Can we just say that 4:3 is like the podcast, like the official podcast favorite aspect ratio?
Yeah. Shout out 4:3. I
Shout
love
out
me some
4:3.
4:3.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
Especially in this instance, it's used for a specific reason. It isn't just 4:3 to be 4:3. 4:3 is used so you're closer and it's a more intimate film. Because there's less, you're seeing EO in his face. You're not seeing anything on the outside. You're directly looking into his eyes. And I talked about this in my review. You have a donkey. He's a real donkey. He's not gonna talk. The real emotion you're gonna get with the film is through his eyes.
Yeah.
So I think it's brilliant.
And I think there's a good conversation to be had there about filmmakers who do stuff like that in a way that's just gimmicky and doesn't serve
For
any
sure.
purpose, but that also makes you appreciate something like EO a lot more because you could actually see the reasoning for a decision like that.
Yep.
My number 3, I feel almost like I'm here as a transition guide at this point, but my number 3 is Babylon, which I also am not going to get into any details about other than saying that I really, really like this movie and it's my 3rd favorite movie of the year. But yeah, that's another movie that we're going to talk about in detail pretty soon. So I will pass it over to Doug again for your number 2 of the year.
Yeah, starting to doubt the structure of this podcast a little bit because this feels a little awkward. Because my number 2 is Avatar, and I don't know what to say other than that I like it a lot, and we're going to talk about it ad nauseum here in a second.
Yeah.
To go
And
back to
that is
Owen.
probably going to be recurring.
Yeah.
on Owen's
So
list as
this
well.
is kind of awkward as well because my second favorite movie of the year is Babylon, which I think we're going to talk about that a little later. So now it's Kevin's turn.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that my top 2 of the year are
We lost
I've already gotten Avatar and Babylon out of the way. And since I know that you guys still have to exhaust those with your final picks, I could do both of mine right here, but I'll stick to number 2 for now. After Sun is my number 2 movie of the year. I know it's a movie that neither of you have seen, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, After Sun is a really good movie. I'm gonna try to talk about it without going over any boundaries and sharing too much personal information. But After Sun is a movie that personally affected me, maybe stronger than any movie I've ever watched in my entire life. Not to say that the emotional reaction out of me, there's no real way to measure that. There's probably movies I've cried at more or whatever, but I don't know that I can compare the feelings that I had after watching After Sun to the feelings that I've had watching any other movie ever. It's so interesting, and I've brought this up a number of times with people who I've recommended it to already, but it's, despite the fact that it's fantastic filmmaking, like Charlotte Wells is clearly a very good director. It's very well acted. There's a lot of technical stuff to really applaud. It looks amazing, even though it's very simplistic. There's not a whole lot to even look at. It takes place in the most minimalistic setting ever. It's a vacation movie, except the entire vacation is really just in the constraints of a resort. It's not even you're seeing whatever place they're vacationing to, so there's not a whole lot to look at, but it still looks amazing. But lots of people are gonna watch After Sun and maybe be bored by even just a really short movie because there's almost nothing going on. It's 90 minutes of no real action. It's just kind of events, and it's told through memories, someone looking back at memories that they have of this vacation that they went on as a child. And yeah, there's not all that much there, and it kind of lulls you to sleep almost, but you are still on the edge of your seat because I, at least, and I assume a lot of people feel this way, went into the movie expecting it to be emotional. I was told ahead of time, this movie is going to crush me and make me very emotional. And so you don't really know when that's going to start. And after 30 minutes of watching the movie, when there's still really nothing moving the plot forward, I'm curious how this is going to affect me. And that kind of continues on. And I didn't even cry during the actual runtime of this movie. Nothing actually ruined me while I was watching it. And the ending shot is so affecting that it happens, and then I waited 1 minute with my thoughts, and then all it took was 60 seconds, and I had a full-blown panic attack, tears flowing, sobbing, ugly crying. I was what the fuck did I just watch? This is literally this has ruined my life now, and it's not going to leave my thoughts for weeks and weeks and weeks, because it is such an interesting exploration of mini spoiler, but depression. Like, and the way that it does it is so thoughtful because of how universal it is. Yeah, technically not everybody who watches it is going to be a father, but the movie never directly states what this depressed character is like going through, minus a couple lines. Like, there is a million different things that could be causing the depression that this character is feeling, and by not giving us any details about it, it's so easy to project your own emotions onto this character and relate to him. And his daughter in the movie, just like, at least for me, left jealous of, because it's a movie about memories and looking back at this character who's now in his 30s and comparing him side by side with his daughter who's a little kid. If you're anybody who has experienced depression and you're seeing what he's going through, you see this little kid and you're like, oh, I wish that I could just go back to these memories that I have in my head of my childhood when everything was okay, and this is not something that had ever affected me. And it's like, could I give this another chance? Like, could I start all over? Like, that kind of thing. And it really just makes you look so introspectively, and it just like tears you apart. It's a movie that I will recommend to anybody with caution, because if you don't feel emotions after watching this, then I'm not sure that any movies could really make you emotional. So yeah, that is my long and thoughtful rant about why Aftersun is absolutely amazing and everybody should watch it. Anyway, let's hear about your number one picks, even though you can't really go into detail.
Yeah, I mean, I think that our friends from the show over there on the Real Talk podcast also really like Aftersun. I think they're all really high on that movie too.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. I was not able to get around to it. I know that I'll like it, obviously. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure I will get something out of it just because it emotionally resonates with so many people. But you know how it is. Best movie of the year is fucking Babylon. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. All I'll say is, like, the best movie of the year is Babylon, and we will talk about it later, but
I'm sure you have a ton to say. I think we all do, so.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah,
my number one movie of the year is a little movie that
number one.
I think everyone should go see because people aren't going to theaters and movies aren't making money. I think that is James Cameron's Avatar. That is, yeah, the spectacle of spectacles. Yeah. Go see it in 3D, high frame rate, see it all.
Avatar rocks. I think we're all in agreement on that.
Avatar rocks the podcast.
Yes, exactly. And my number one movie, the final movie on our top fives that I maybe will also go on a bit of a passionate rant about. My number one movie is Nope, directed by Jordan Peele.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
Why did you do that, Doug?
Yeah, nobody saw that coming. This movie it's so hard after giving such a passionate spiel about Aftersun to be like, yeah, that changed my life, and here's my number one. And by the way, it's not Aftersun, it's this movie directed by Jordan Peele. But
this monster movie.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's so much to be said about Nope that I'm not going to go into extreme detail. But for me, at least, a lot of what I appreciate about watching movies is, and this is pretty universal for at least a number of movies in my top five, is I love movies that I could pick apart and look for deeper meanings. I love movies that I can really spend time with and analyze and figure out all these different conversation points to have and share that with people and engage in conversations with people. And I think Nope starts so many interesting conversations. Obviously, we've already talked about spectacle. I think it starts a super interesting conversation about spectacle. And I think what Nope does so effectively is that it takes the conversation of spectacle and is enhanced by stuff that isn't even in the movie, because people's reactions to Nope, for me, make Nope better.
The Logan Paul tweet.
Like friend of the pod, Logan Paul.
Logan Paul tweet. The Logan Paul tweet's one example, but even putting that aside, when you talk about the big Jaws like reveal of the alien at the end of Nope, and you see this thing that doesn't have any like blood or teeth or like anything gross about it. It's just like essentially this gigantic like kite looking thing.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome because so much of the reaction to Nope has been, yeah, that monster sucked. Like that reveal was awful and that was boring and stupid. And it's like, if that's what you think, then like you're proving Jordan Peele's point. Like you're proving that this man has just said, like, you guys are obsessed with spectacle. And now you don't like the ending of my movie because you're obsessed with spectacle. And I like, there's stuff like that about Nope that just like transcends just what happens within the constraints of the movie. Like that is like a conversation happening outside of the movie that I think makes it so interesting, and that is just going to make me want to like pick it apart more and more as time goes on. And that's just a quality that I really love about movies. And then when you pair that with the fact that, for me at least, Nope is just lots of fun. Like Daniel Kaluuya is so good in it. It to me is exhilarating. Like it captures the feeling of wanting to capture things, like loving the movie making process so well. So like even just as a movie alone, when you look at it within the context of the movie, this is just a really fun movie. Like I saw this 3 times in theaters. So yeah, there's just so much for me to appreciate about it. And that's all I could say as to why I like it more than the movie that literally gave me panic attacks and made me cry. Because Nope makes me cry in an appreciative way.
Yeah. We can do like a mini talk about Nope. I think Nope is really good too. I mean, Owen, it was on Owen's list. It wasn't on my list, but I think Nope is really good too. I love the B plot of Nope about the monkey. I think that Gordy. I almost said Marcel, like Marcel the Shell.
Very different movie.
Yeah,
no,
it couldn't be more different, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think that the Gordy plot was super like interesting, and I think that what's his name, the Steven Yeun character was also super interesting. And obviously we all love monsters here. This is a monster friendly podcast. So we're all big Jean Jacket fans, and I think that Nope is great. It's probably my favorite Jordan Peele, actually. I think I like that movie more than Get Out. Nope is just
it's my
special.
favorite Jordan Peele.
Yeah. And like in comparing, I mean, again, not to compare the two, because I don't even really know that that's necessary, but like Nope also offers like a lot of very interesting social commentary, in the sense that like, yeah, we're going to mention this when we talk about Babylon as well, but like Nope is simultaneously a movie that loves the filmmaking process but is willing to call out Hollywood for all of their wrongdoing. Unlike Babylon, this one is more specifically about racism in Hollywood, and Jordan Peele does like such a good job exploring that. Like he proves that so much, not just through like Daniel Kaluuya's character and Keke Palmer's character, but also like you mentioned, you loved Steven Yeun's character, Jupe, and like it's shown a lot through that. Like this is somebody who was a child star and has just been forgotten. And we know that is the reality for a lot of people who worked in Hollywood that are not white. So, yeah, there's just a lot to be explored there. I think he does a really good job navigating all those themes and then pairing them with all of the stuff about spectacle and everything else that we can appreciate about the movie.
Do you guys want to take a quick break and then talk about Avatar?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, we're going to start talking about Avatar: The Way of Water now. This is a movie that we all really, really liked. We're just going to start by talking about our general experiences with seeing the movie in theaters on a big screen. Just a little warning beforehand. We tried to stay pretty spoiler-free when it came to our top fives. We're going to go into detail about Avatar as well as Babylon later. So these will both be talks that definitely dive a lot into spoilers. Doug, would you like to start by sharing your theater experience?
Yeah, so we, like the three of us, we all saw it twice in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it once at like a dual screen IMAX. That was very, very nice. It's my preferred theater to go to for big releases like this. But I do not believe my theater showed it in high frame rate. which that's being but because like the dual screen IMAXs, some of them are showing in high frame rate, some of them are not. It's because the dual screen IMAX projectors, dual laser. I'm saying it wrong. The dual laser IMAX projectors, they can't do 4K high frame rate because the projector's too big and it'll overheat if it does that for some reason. So a lot of them are doing 2K high frame rate. I think my theater did 4K 24 constant. But then I went back and I saw it with my parents at a Regal cinema, because Regal's like the only theater chain that's like advertising high frame rate. So I went back and I saw it at a Regal cinema in high frame rate, and I don't know, both times were really good. Both theaters were kind of not super full. My I kind of talked to you guys about this. My theater didn't really cheer at either showings either, which is lame as hell.
Mine didn't either.
It's interesting because my theater on Friday night was because I saw it the opening Thursday, and then I saw it immediately after the next day on Friday night, and my theater on Friday night was way more full because it was a Friday than my theater on Thursday, but the crowd cheered so much more during my Thursday screening. And there was way less people. There weren't really even a lot of people there at all on my Thursday
but
screening.
they are there. The people there opening night Thursday night are the people there that really want to see it. So that might be a little more fans over numbers there.
Yeah, because there was it was really just like 5 guys just getting
on
Thursday night. Just 5 guys who absolutely loved everything.
Shout out those guys. Yeah, so I saw it twice as well. I saw it the first time on Thursday at my local AMC, which was in 3D with high frame rate. And I thought this was the most beautiful thing ever. And then I saw it that same Sunday on IMAX 3D, but not high frame rate. And obviously IMAX, it's way bigger and it's a really great. But I think I prefer the high frame rate more. I thought it was more interesting, at least to look at. And I'd like to see it, maybe check it, go see it again in theaters in high frame rate again. If I do see it in theaters, I will be seeing it in high frame rate, because I think that is the more interesting way to see it.
One thing that I maybe regret a little bit, at least about my experience, is that I really did not do anything to switch up my viewing experiences. I saw it 2 days in a row within 24 hours of each other, and both times were in Dolby 3D. And not just that, but in the exact same theater, in the exact same seat that I was sitting in both nights. So nothing changed about my experience other than the crowd and the person that I saw the movie with. But I had a great experience both times. I love to, at least if I adore a movie, I love to see it a second time in theaters, because I want to make sure that everything I love about it is consistent if I'm going to revisit it. Granted, it's kind of hard to tell when you see it just 24 hours later. It's like, you're just kind of like hammering everything home that you already just saw the day before. But yeah, the high frame rate stuff for me also worked pretty well. I thought it made it very engaging. I definitely can see how it could be maybe like headache inducing for some people, because of how new it is. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. I could see why people might complain about it, is all I'm saying, but it didn't bother me, and I thought that all of the 3D stuff was very engaging, and I think this is a movie that people should see on a big screen.
You're saying that the 3D in Avatar is good?
Yeah, I am saying that. Yeah,
that's crazy. No, Jim Cameron can't do any wrong. Just like the exposition in this movie at the very beginning.
I was just about to get to that. I was just about to mention that. I'm like, so let's go through all of the plot of the movie. Let's get into the details. But at least the beginning section of the movie, prior to the new setting where most of the movie takes place, the beginning gives us a ton of exposition in a way that I at least think is delivered very well for a sequel that is spaced out 14 years from the original, because you do kind of have to keep in mind, again, and you shouldn't have to do this, but you do kind of have to keep in mind that people who are young watching this movie, it's possible that people will go see this movie without seeing the first Avatar. That's just something that is most likely true. And people might view it as like clunky, unnecessary dialogue, but he's keeping that audience in mind because he wants to send a universal message with his movie. He wants it to be appreciated by as many people as possible. And so I think that delivering all of that exposition early on, the way that he does, the way that he reintroduces all of these characters and still makes the beginning parts of the movie very interesting, for me at least, all of that stuff really worked to a crowd that might have not like seen the first one or just doesn't remember it from years and years ago.
Yeah, well, I think the exposition is handled super, super, super well. It's kind of like early on you kind of pick up on the fact, like there's narration in the first Avatar, but early on you kind of pick up on the fact that like the video diaries that they use in the first movie to kind of like drive the plot along and keep the viewer privy to what's happening, like on the specifics. It's basically like holding your hand. That's all now replaced with just like Sam Worthington narration.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound great on paper when I say it like that, but I think it's handled super well. I think that Sam Worthington's narration is really great because it's like basically the beginning of the movie is like Sam Worthington being like, well, me and Natiri had some babies and the Scott people left. And now the Scott people came back, and I think it's all handled super, super, actually kind of with class, and I think it's all very fun. And
a little pause to cough between.
And that's how Sam Worthington.
He was so in character. He couldn't even go back to talking. He was like, I have to keep it going.
And the and I think all the characters that we get introduced to are kind of because he introduces his kids because he's like, we even had a little adopted monkey boy, a little boy named Spada who hangs around.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe the furthest thing from an impression of Jake that I could imagine someone doing. I feel like you're mixing like just anybody from like Texas with like the Sully character and Bones and all.
What do you mean? It's me, Jake Sully. I'm a really hard-working dad. I love my kids so much. A son for a son.
Like this is definitely an Adult Swim character that you're doing. Like,
yeah. Hey, it's me, Jake Sully. I'm in Avatar, baby.
No, yeah, I'm in agreement though. I think his narration is like, yeah, it's not handled in a bad way at all because people complain a lot about narration in movies, and I'm like, some movies need narration, and that's something that, especially when you're talking about like a big blockbuster action flick, like this is part of almost what you expect from gigantic blockbuster action flicks. Like a lot of them have narration, not to say that all of them do it right or like do it well, but I think this one does.
Well, yeah, narration is a tool, and you can use it well or you can use it not well. It's just kind of who is using it. I think James Cameron used it really well here. And I also do think, yes, we talked about it earlier, James Cameron knows how the general reception, especially in America, of how the first Avatar is perceived now. And there's a lot of stuff like he has to explain in these first however many minutes. I think how the story is structured is really interesting because for me, you're in Pandora, and this is kind of a familiar experience. I've seen this movie 4 times this year, like the original movie 4 times this year before seeing the new one. So insane. I was very familiar with Pandora, so I had that comfort of being like, I know where we are, I know what we like. I know where we are. So they're adding all of the new characters and the new information. And even the new high frame rate, that was an adjustment as well. So think that whole 30-minute, 40 whatever minute like introduction bit where you're giving new characters, you're getting the where they've been, what they've been doing, is actually handled really well, all things considered. And it was handled so well, I forgot when they got into the water place that this movie even was about the water place because I was so into the damn movie and I went to
Yeah.
see it with my dad on
Look at
Sunday, and he forgot about the water place too.
Yeah. We're still in like the first like 10 minutes of the movie. That's like it happens an hour in.
Yeah. But if we want to, other than just general exposition stuff, if we want to talk about specific scenes in the beginning of the movie, I think we're probably all in agreement that like maybe the most interesting scene before the water stuff is I believe it's a train that they like raid, right? Is it a
Oh,
train
that's
that
what we
they
wanted to
blow
talk
up?
about. Oh yeah. So okay, in this new movie, Sam Worthington is Jake Sully. I was talking. Yeah, Jake Sully.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No
in
impressions this time.
Yeah, in this movie, Jake Sully is kind of like the leader of a rebellion, basically, kind of like a Che Guevara. I'm throwing that word like that around
Yeah,
really loosely.
maybe very loose.
Yeah,
Loose
you know,
relation.
but like just like like this like violent revolutionary leader, because like the humans have come back, so he's kind of like leading like rebellious attacks against them to like kind of fuck up their infrastructure, like the trading system that they got for traveling and stuff. And there's a scene that's really cool. It's a kind of a great action set piece where they're robbing a train. It's super
They're
fucking
taking their
dope.
guns.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they want the weapons from the train. That's
Yeah, they want the
that's
weapons from
what
the
we know.
train.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. We haven't talked about. Okay, sorry. Before we move on, we have to talk about this. Like, the biggest difference between the first Avatar and this Avatar is that there's kids in this one, and there's a lot of them. There's like 5 kids. No, there's like 8 kids in this movie that like get a lot of screen time. But like particularly like it's not just like James Cameron was it just like we'll do like it's like what if Romeo and Juliet stay together, right? They will have like a kid. It's like no. He's like they'll have 4 kids and an adopted child.
Yeah.
And like not an adopted and a little human boy that's basically like their proto foster child. And it's
Yeah.
like
Well-
that's a lot for a story.
They have Kiri who's adopted as well.
Oh yeah, and Carrie. So they have 3
Yeah.
kids, Carrie and then Spider. Like,
Yeah.
and that's like
Well, I bring up the train robbery scene because I think that other than the like Jake Sully narration, kind of like early montage stuff that they do introducing all of these kids, I think that the train robbery scene is maybe like the most interesting thing about the kids, at least early on in the movie, because you see like this one of the more important relationships between the 2 brothers during this train robbery, where they kind of pretty much like the younger of the 2 brothers, the one that is like pretty rebellious, I guess is a
Farouk?
good description. Yeah, like he's kind of the one that suggests that they do something by getting up close with this mission when they were instructed not to by their dad. And you see immediately the fallout of making that decision when one of them is like nearly killed essentially, or at least we know could have been killed, and that's why Jake is so mad at them. But it just like I think that's a really interesting early example of some of the relationships in the movie, not just between the 2 brothers, but then obviously right after that train scene when he is pretty hard on them after and is pretty angry about them making that decision, because it's proof of how much he cares about the well-being of his children.
the younger brother's name is Loak, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. that's
Loak
the
and
younger
the
one.
team.
And Natiyam's the older brother? Okay, yeah. So like that first train scene is when we get the glimpse out to like kind of like the biggest, I want to say like the biggest character arc in the movie, which is Loak, who it's kind of like the foundation where we realize like Loak is like kind of like the fuck up in a way of the Sully family, where he's just like he's always like fucking around and disappointing his father, his parents.
You have a lot of kids, but I think they all have their own interesting dynamics, and they're all very individual in their own way. It's not just 8 kids that are like just there. These are like the forefront of the movie and the most important aspect of the film.
Yeah. My favorite scene from the beginning exposition kind of like dump section is happens a little after this. It might even be the next scene. I don't remember exactly. but it's when we get back reintroduced to Quaritch. But it's not him. The scene that I'm thinking of is like, obviously because like he wakes up and starts like he wakes up and he just sees
yeah.
blue people and he just like starts punching because he's just like blue people bad, and that's badass as like. And then obviously like he's like, wait, hold on, all right, and then he looks in the mirror and he's like, well, I'll be damned. No, he goes, well, ain't that a bitch? And that's like one of my favorite lines of the movie.
Yeah.
But
he's so good.
He's a
Stephen
little
Lang-
jokester. He's a little jokester for sure.
Yeah,
Stephen Lang is having
cracking jokes.
so much fun in this movie. He is he's having so much fun in this movie. But the when Stephen Lang is in the spaceship and he is watching the only video diary, right, in the whole movie, which is live action, like de-aged, I think, Stephen Lang talking to himself, being like, well, if you're seeing this, that means that I'm dead. And what's his name? The other guy that was minding unobtainium from the first movie comes in, and he's basically just like, well, because Stephen Lang's like, what am I supposed to say? And the other guy comes in and is just like, well, you tell him that, well, if you're reading this instead, and this little thing right here is this all your fucking memories, all right? And I'm gonna put this in a blue person. That's just great fucking exposition, like masterclass in exposition. I love that so much. It's so entertaining. Like.
And I think it's cool that like because he's not like it's not like he's a new villain. Like he's obviously recurring from the first movie. But like I would still, that's what I was gonna say. I would still consider this, like, despite the fact that we're already familiar with him, like pretty much a character introduction, because at least a character introduction to like him in this movie, and in terms of like how characters are introduced, like. It's maybe like the best one in this movie. Like I just think it's really interestingly handled. Not that the children aren't all like very interesting characters, but his introduction itself is just like handled really well for somebody who's being brought back in this like new form. I guess is the right way to describe it.
Yeah. That's a character that could be very easily mishandled and gone really bad, because it could have just been the same guy returning and it's like, oh, who cares? But I think they handled it really well. Especially we'll get to it later, but he's basically a different character. He has those dots in his head looming. I think he is way more interesting in this to kind of keep going in the franchise than if he stayed alive in the last movie. If he stayed alive in the last movie and we're like, oh, he's just gonna come back, I don't think it would have been as interesting as what they've done here. I think I'm excited for where they take that whole storyline.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. And I think that another thing to circle back a little bit to like all of the children is that I don't really find like the criticisms of like poor writing or underdeveloped characters making all that much sense when you look at the kids, because like you said, Owen, like all of these kids feel very distinct from each other. Like they all feel unique. It's not just like, oh, we had 5 kids and like here's the names of our 5 kids and that's all you know about them, right? Like you actually can separate them from each other in terms of like personality and what's going on, which is a lot to do, even though it's like a lengthy movie, like a lot to do with 5 different kids. And like you do end up, like obviously we'll get into this stuff later, but like you do end up caring about each of them individually like a whole lot. So I don't know, I just think there's a lot to be said about how that early exposition is handled and like how these kids are introduced in a way that, like, to me at least, is really meaningful, because I cared about all of them the whole way through, and like nailing that introduction is pretty important, since the movie's pretty much like after those early moments at least like handing itself off to them, since they're essentially the main characters of this movie, rather than Jake.
Yeah, I really think like here you're being made to care, and I think if you aren't made to care, then none of the action set pieces are any point of matter, because if you don't care for these characters' lives, then like what's the point? And I think I think it was really interesting is James Cameron is not holding any punches, and really think any character could really die in this franchise, which is why like caring for these characters and having these big action set pieces is really fascinating and really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this all happens over the course of like 50 minutes, and then Jake is basically yeah. So this all happens over the course of like 50 minutes, and then Jake Sully is basically like, we need to get the fuck out of town. After Neytiri is like, what are you talking about? And what does he say? He goes, hey, this family is our fortress, darling. No matter where we go, this family is our fortress. And that basically convinces Neytiri to go with Sam Worthington and travel to the water people, which is
Yeah,
one of
the Metcaina.
the Makaina,
Yeah.
which is where the interesting stuff happens. I think okay, there's a few things I don't like about this movie, obviously, and one of them has to do with when they get to the Mekaina, right? And we first meet them, and when the daughter of the tribe leader, like, first is introduced, and she's like walking out of the water, and she's like flipping her hair back, and like she's trying to like James Cameron is framing her to be like super attractive. It's like, why do you want me to be attracted to this like little kid, like Navi, water Navi? It's like, why are you like shooting her like this? It's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a strange creative decision. Although, to be fair, if we're getting into the nitpicky stuff that deep, I guess that's probably a testament to how good the movie is.
Yeah. This movie's very good.
But yeah, do we want to dive into the post Metcaina introduction stuff, or does anybody have
Dive
anything they
in.
want to say about the early stuff? No, yeah, I didn't even listen. I'm just that good at this. I'm just that good at the transitions.
Well, I think that it's so a lot of people have been like, this is structured just like an 80s fucking action movie, and I think that is interesting because it is very much, it's like, it's about this dude who's just like, we gotta get our family out of here. And then it's like, well, it's also, people are also saying how it's like, it's just the first Avatar again, which it is basically, because it's like they all have to just like, you're just like, you're handed like a whole new world basically with the Mekainas tribes, and you have to like fall in love with it through like the surrogate viewers of the Jake Sully and of like the Sully family, like Jake Neytiri and the kids. And I think it's like handled very well. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that like the water effects are some of like the most striking things ever put to celluloid. It's not celluloid even because it's all shot digital, but you know what I mean? It looks so amazing. Like, there are moments there are moments in like some of like the water passages here that really look like live action, and like you start to notice that, where it's like, oh wait, this is like just like brief moments where it's like, man, this looks like a human being painted blue, or like he went somewhere and found like this real life cat person. But yeah, no, sorry, it's all over the place. The Mekaina introduction, right, where he's like, yeah, the Mekaina tribe leader, he's a very stern leader, but that's not who I'm worried about. I'm worried about Kate Winslet. I think that's all very good.
It's interesting how much this movie is just not Avatar in your eyes, but instead a movie full of people with like 1960s movie accent.
What do you mean?
Because I feel almost like we're not talking about the same movie right now.
I literally don't know what you're talking
like
about.
a John Ford movie.
Yeah.
John Ford's Avatar. Hold on. You type in like GDP, like write Avatar 3 directed by John Ford.
There you go.
But I agree that a lot of like, I mean, obviously, like, I want to get into some of this stuff in later scenes, but even like just what you're saying about how like gorgeous all of the water stuff looks, like you kind of notice that like literally immediately. Like even like as soon like that little intro when they're first flying in, and it kind of goes over that like I don't know what you would call it, like the rock structure that like separates the what is it, the reef? Is that what they call it? Yeah, the
Mhm.
reef from like the rest of the ocean.
Yeah.
Like as soon as they're like flying over that thing, and you kind of just like see everybody, and like everybody gets so excited about their entrance, and like you see how gorgeous like this like clash between the ocean water and like the shallower reef water is. I'm like, I already know that all of this ocean stuff is about to blow my mind in terms of how it looks, because that just initial like introduction into like where this setting has shifted to, I'm like, this looks amazing.
New segment. Doug's Tech Corner, so I could talk to you a lot of fucking misconception about some of this Avatar shit. Okay, number one, you might have listened to another unnamed, very popular movie podcast in which the host says that it is real water in the shots in Avatar. I am here to tell you there is no real water on screen. All of the water in Avatar is completely CGI. Like they mocapped the water when like I don't want to get too into it, but they captured the water like the way that the water looks, and and they obviously did all the mocap underwater to capture like how the people act underwater while swimming and stuff. But the physical water that you were looking at, like the waves and everything, it is all CGI. That's not real water. Um, those were
Yeah.
made by VFX artists that are probably very happy to be spending time with their families right now. um,
Yeah, yeah.
Real. Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, you can imagine how much work went into that, obviously.
Yeah.
And I heard, and this is like a total little bit of a tangent here, since we're talking about the mocap and the water and stuff. But I just think it's really interesting. I heard, at least from a unnamed TikTok source, who revealed that they worked on Avatar, and their job on set was
I saw this TikTok. Did I send you this TikTok?
no,
Oh.
someone else sent it to
You
me.
sent
My
it, you
friend
sent it to
sent
me. You sent it to
Yeah,
me.
I sent it to Owen, right? And before you
yeah.
finish, I sent it to Owen, and I said, "This is a fucking lie." I said, "There's no way this guy's telling the truth." I feel so strongly that he just made all of that up.
I don't think there's any reason to not believe. First of all, for context, before we even go into it, let me just explain what the TikTok actually says. The TikTok just described that he was in control of the temperatures of everybody's water tank, and that certain people wanted the water tanks at different temperatures, and it made it difficult to capture some of the actors when they were in scenes together, because some of them wanted the water to be like room temperature
Yeah.
water, some of them wanted to be swimming in water that was a little bit hotter, and for whatever reason, the star of the show, Sam Worthington, wanted to be in like colder
Cold,
water than
yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no way to like prove whether this is
But
true
no,
or not
no, no.
until like
The
somebody.
thing that makes me feel like this is all bullshit is when he said that like Sam Worthington could only do cold water, and Sigourney Weaver could only do hot water, right? So for whenever they were in a water scene together, they had to do it separately. So they were never actually doing the mocap together. That was the moment when I was like, "You're just making that up." I do not believe James Cameron let that shit fly. Like, there's no way. Like, what are we
Yeah.
talking about? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Avatar
who
was a
can
big
that?
Goldilocks scene behind set. No one could get along.
Isn't there like a picture of like all of like Sam Worthington and all of them in the water together? Also?
Yeah, I feel like that's just, and the more and more I think about it, the more and more it sounds kind of like bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very
I just
weird.
thought it was an interesting thing to bring up. That's all, because we don't. There's actually no real way to prove
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, until somebody like James Cameron actually speaks out about it. But yeah, I just thought it was like a fun
He's
little
got
thing. I
better
was
things
like,
to do.
yeah.
With the back on the kind of there's no water thing, there's an interesting bit where James Cameron talked about, because they're asking why is this movie so expensive, and well, if you shoot this movie on the real ocean, you have the water already there, so you don't have to pay for the water. So they had to create all the water, and then you're on ground zero still. You paid for all this technology, but you didn't get anywhere. You already had the water. Now you have to do the actual other stuff, and so there's that whole bit. And it's really pushing technology, and this is kind of a film that's kind of almost ripped out of the future in the same way that Avatar 2009 was. and when you see it, it is unreal because of that thing. There's nothing really like it, and I think you have to kind of see it to believe it. It's one of those films that it is a must watch.
Yeah, I would say the water effects in this movie are almost as good as Aquaman, directed by James Wan. Just like halfway there.
Yeah, is that
just halfway?
just
Like Jim Cameron
Alright.
almost achieved what James Wan achieved.
I mean, halfway is pretty generous if we're gonna get into specifics.
$1 billion
maybe
movie,
even
Aquaman.
maybe just a quarter of the way.
Yeah, Aquaman, as of recording this podcast right now, has grossed more than Avatar 2. So really, like, anyways, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
So they go, they meet the Mekaina. They're like, you will learn our ways. And then they learn their ways, and then they get into a little bit of kerfuffles, and what happens that's important?
Is the spider capturing is pre-Mekaina, correct?
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
That-
we
there's
said
the-
Okay.
there's
Because
the
that
whole little action
that little
set piece.
interrogation
Yeah,
scene
yeah.
that they have is pretty intense for a child.
He's
That
got like the
seems pretty-
spinny thing going on. He's
Yeah.
bleeding out of his nose.
Yeah. Very Stranger Things-esque.
Yeah.
Shut
Well,
up.
yeah. I mean, come on.
Listen, I'm strictly talking about the nosebleed here.
So Duffer Brothers. So Duffer Brothers inspired. Um,
I'm just trying to appease the
Yeah,
Stranger
Yeah,
Things
she's
fans.
all our
There's-
Stranger Things fans.
Yeah, there's got to be some overlap between the largest
well,
TV
James
show
Cameron-
and Avatar.
James Cameron did just mention Stranger Things because he was like, "Yeah, I didn't want to have my kids like grow up like Stranger Things
Yeah.
because I wanted them to be." And people were all like weirdly mad about this because everything that James Cameron, people are gonna be weirdly mad about this. But I think it makes perfect sense, especially when you talk about Jack Champion's Spider. Because he is a real human. He is not a CG character. Him
That's what I
growing
was-
up is like a real issue. Like,
I was gonna bring up Spider. That is like a documented issue on set where they started filming it so long ago, right?
Mhm.
So they had to actually, because Jack Champion, when he was casted as Spider, was like a preteen, I think, right? Like he's
very young.
so he was like getting different, like he was getting like bigger and a deeper voice like month by month, right? So they would shoot like days worth of footage, and then later they would have to go back and reshoot the footage because he had grown and was different and like looked so different.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which totally makes sense why James Cameron's like, okay, we're going to shoot your scenes for these next movies because we don't want you to come and be totally different. And I think people being up in arms about that. Because I think people were saying, well, your characters are CGI, and something that we didn't really talk about is Sigourney Weaver is, 74 playing a teenager?
Shit. Yeah, so we're gonna be as hell.
So, yeah, they were like, oh, you have a 74-year-old playing a teenager, why can't you have the kids grow up little? Well, yeah, but Jack Champion is a real kid. Like, he's not a Navi, so that's dumb argument.
Yeah, and not just that, but like he's at a stage in his life.
Yeah, like he's going
where,
to change.
where his physical appearance is going to change pretty dramatically, pretty quickly,
Yeah,
and over the course of an entire series of movies. Like, there's no way you can keep him
it's a
looking the
really
same
smart,
between- yeah.
mental kind of thinking to have to shoot scenes earlier because they don't grow up. I think that's how kind of it's. I don't know.
It feels a lot like one of those complaints where people are nitpicking because
Yeah,
they just want to hate on
It's
James
like, oh,
Cameron
he
because
mentioned
they can.
Stranger Things. Like,
It's like, and I think a lot of that boils down to the fact that I've seen a lot of people at least talk about how they're just like, James Cameron is like too cocky or full of himself or whatever, and they're like so upset about it, and there's like this entire crowd of people who will even like go out of their way to be like, yeah, James Cameron is still annoying and cocky, but Avatar was really good. And it's like, can't we just like allow the guy who is maybe like one of the greatest directors ever to
Maybe.
act? Okay, well, I'm saying
Give
maybe
it
like
to him, give it to
hypothetically.
him, give it to him.
I'm saying hypothetically for the people that are mad at him, right?
Hey,
Like,
he's top two,
like-
not two.
yeah. Okay.
Leave
My point is, like, can't we just allow this guy who is clearly one of the greatest directors ever to act like he's one of the greatest directors ever? Like, you would never apply this in any other context and get mad about it. Like you would never let one of the greatest like if one of the greatest athletes on the planet was like, hey, I'm really good at this sport that I play,
Yeah.
nobody would be like, yo, screw that guy. No, he's not.
No,
Everybody,
like imagine he would never do this because he's so humble. But imagine if Messi, right after this World Cup, was like, I think I might be the best player to ever kick the soccer ball. And imagine like getting like super fucking pissed off at him and be
Yeah.
like, he's no. I was gonna say a name I can't pronounce. He's no Pele. I was gonna say the other guy's name. I don't know how to say it though. Um, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so silly. He
But
just won the World Cup. Like
I think James Cameron being vocal, whether people like it or not, is good for the future of the industry, because I think directors in like the last 10 years, 20 years or so have been kind of like nobodies in interviews and like things. Like you have a lot of Marvel directors, we just never see them and we never talk about them because we don't hear from them. And
Yeah.
James Cameron is talking his shit because he has stuff to back it up. And I think him being in discussions, this is James Cameron's Avatar. This isn't Disney's Avatar or whatever. This is James Cameron's Avatar. And I think that is really big for the future of directing.
Yeah, and it almost speaks to like when you compare it to Marvel, it like speaks to the fact that they have like essentially just these kind of like figureheads where like everybody is obsessed with Marvel because of the superheroes and the actors who play them, and it's like proof really that there's not that much like artistry going on from the perspective of the director, because they're having it stripped from them a little bit, where it's like, no, we're instead just gonna peddle like these talking heads who are like these super, like famous like Robert Downey Jr.'s and guys like that, to just be like, yeah, like they're gonna go to every press conference and every single interview and be like, you guys should watch this movie. And you don't hear about these directors because they don't even have that much influence on like what's going on. And like if you want to talk about it in the grand scope of like what movies are, and it's like, yeah, like James, like it's art. And like James
John
Cameron
Watts
is an
is.
artist.
I mean, James Cameron's no John Watts. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Okay. But you know what, like it's like film, like movies are art, and it's like, yeah, not to say that acting isn't also art, but like the art is like most largely dictated by the creator of the art. And like that's never shown through the Marvel directors because nobody's viewing them from that way. So it's like when this big blockbuster movie that also happens to be clearly a very artistic vision, like, yeah, of course he's gonna hype it up from his perspective, because we're talking about an actual like artist, like we're talking about somebody who's actually creating art. So like he should be the one that is the face of these movies. Like, not to say that the star shouldn't get recognition because it's this big blockbuster movie, everybody involved should get talked about most likely in the press, but like, yeah, we want James Cameron to be the face of this franchise because he's the artist behind it. Like he's the one most directly responsible for what's happening in the franchise and the success of the franchise.
James Cameron said it himself. He is the only person that can direct the Avatar movies, and anyone could basically direct that Marvel movie if they just get told what to do.
Yeah.
So we made up with the Mechaina, right?
Yeah.
And they
I
had to
think we
learn
go
the way
into
of the
this
water.
fight scene that kind of triggers the rest of the events of the movie, because the fight that happens between Jake Sully's children and
So the fight that happens between Loak and the children of the tribe leader.
yes,
Yes.
Yeah, which
because
his
that
name
kind
might
of
even know.
catapults what happens after, where they take Loak out into the deep sea, and like that's where we meet my favorite character. But anyway, let's talk about the fight specifically, because one thing I like about it at least is that it. Oh, I feel like Doug has an interjection.
Yeah, I do have 5 hands, and that's kind of that's very weird, isn't it? But I can do something very cool with it. I just tie it up into a big tight fist, and then I just that's called a punch, bitch.
That's
That's so
exactly how Britton Dalton performed.
Yeah,
the
I
movie.
mean that was almost like
Yeah,
you could
that's
put
not-
those two together and you wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to tell the difference.
No, that's such a sick part of the movie, dude. I love that so much.
I mean, I love that part of the movie because it feels like, not that there aren't like, a couple funny little quips at other points in the movie, but like that part of the movie, at least to me, feels almost like not in any way that's like glaring or wrong, but just like kind of like a fun little tonal shift because it reminds me a lot of like some of my favorite movies, which are like corny little like fun high school movies, like and that reminds me a lot of like the kind of like dialogue and like the fun that comes with like a little high school fight that you would see in like a coming of age movie with like all of like the cheesiness and like fun that comes with it. And I love that that's like a little just like just this one small piece of the movie, but like it just, yeah, I don't know, it makes it like a fun little thing for me because I'm like it's not like a tone shift in the way that like it takes away from the rest of the movie. Like it's not like a bad kind of tone shift. It's just like, oh, this makes me think of this thing, and I'm like, I love these things. So
Yeah.
this is so much fun for me.
No,
Yeah,
it's a
I
really
like it.
grounded scene for this big space water movie. You kind of, for a 74-year-old, James Cameron has like a really interesting and like great perspective on how kids act.
Yeah, well, because he said like each kid is like based off of one of his own
Yeah.
kids in real life. And I like this scene a lot too when we're talking about Avatar because it's like this is basically a scene out of fucking The Fablemans.
Yeah, I was just about to say that as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, the scene's great. And another thing that I love about it too is because it's not just like Loak engages, right? And then like his brother has to back him up, but how Kiri's just like sitting there being like, "Stop it, guys!"
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, well, he's in that fight because they were picking on Carrie, and that adds to that kind of layer of their whole relationship.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
making fun of Kiri for being a little
Little
freako,
freak,
weirdo
yeah.
Jesus chick.
Yeah, I mean that's a good time to start talking about Kiri's character, I think, because it's like clearly Kiri's character has so much about her that is so interesting because we see her essentially as like this, well, at least from our perspective, like not everybody else in the movie is aware of this until her family kind of realizes it at the end, but like she is kind of shaping up to be almost like this like messiah figure because she like clearly has some kind of connection to the planet that nobody else has. The what's the name for it? You guys know what I'm talking about.
What?
The force, like the
Oh,
deity,
Awa?
Oh yeah, she has
The-
Awa.
the deity that they, yeah,
She's
Awa.
connected
Awa.
with Awa.
Yeah,
A
like
lot.
she's connected to Awa in a way that like obviously everybody on Pandora.
We are all connected with Awa in our
Yeah,
special ways.
exactly. But she's
Something that
connected
my
on people.
friend kind of brings up about Kiri that I think is really interesting because a lot of people bring up how in the first movie they really hate how they make Jake Sully like the like the Messiah basically,
Mhm.
and I think that's such a misreading of the first movie. He's not the Messiah because what Awa does, right, is like Awa sees purpose in you. Awa sees purpose in everyone, right? So in the first movie, Jake Sully was a chosen one. Awa saw purpose in Jake Sully to help the Forest Tribe out in this very specific situation, right? Like Awa saw his purpose. Now Awa sees purpose in Natiri, right? Awa like Natiri is now another chosen one, and Awa sees purpose in her and has given her like abilities and has this like really personal relationship with her for some reason. Because even in the first movie, because Grace is tree hugging like whatever like lesbian,
Like a hippie.
yeah, hippie,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Yeah.
I forget the fact that I said lesbian, but I'm allowed to say it. Don't worry. But yeah, yeah, it's good. Kiri's, I think Kiri, popular opinion is that Kiri is the favorite character. I think overall from everybody in general, right?
Except for me.
Except for you. Yeah, we'll get there in a second.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
maybe a good time to transition, at least not all the way to that part, but
Speaking
at
of
least,
Awa,
yeah, at least to the scene that pretty much follows that little fight that they have on the beach. Obviously, a little bit of stuff in between, but like eventually we see them take Loak out into the deep water because they're like, oh, like that's where we go hunting, and you're not man enough if you're not going to come with us or whatever. And so he does follow them because he's like, of course I'm going to follow them. I don't want to.
Classic, like kid.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to look like a
Yeah,
a loser
yeah,
after
yeah.
they get down to fight with each other. I don't want to look.
Well,
weak.
yeah, because he was like, make peace in any way you can, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly, and he's
Right.
trying to,
And he-
to
one
follow
of
his father's
the-
wishes.
One of the other kids makes a comment about, "Oh, I guess we asked the wrong brother
Yeah,
to come
yeah,
out with us."
exactly.
Which also, he's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah,
now
so-
I gotta go.
So he goes out and follows them, and that's where we get like this just awesome interaction between. I don't know what you wanna call the whatever it is that's attacking him. I guess it would
Yeah.
be symbolic of like a shark, but it's
Sure.
not. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
really.
Fucked up space shark thing.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. It's not
It's a-
really like
It's a
shark
big
looking
thing in the
even.
water.
Big,
that's trying to
big
kill
fish.
it.
Think Star Wars. Always bigger
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah, big fish with teeth.
Yeah.
And that is like such, at least for me, like such an anxiety inducing scene. I'm gonna pretend it's not a shark from my perspective because I
Yeah.
love sharks and I
It's
just
a
think they're
shark,
the most
okay.
beautiful things ever. But we'll get into the conversation about how beautiful ocean animals are in a little bit.
But then he
Um,
gets so he gets trapped out there. They fucking prank his ass. He gets left out there. Big
Yeah.
shark thing comes out, scares us right away. Right now he's just hiding from the big shark thing. He's gonna like die. He can't hold his breath for very much longer. And then Kevin's favorite character,
Steals the
Haya
shell.
Khan, yeah,
Haya
Haya
Khan.
Khan comes
Haya
in
Khan.
and saves him, and he has
Yeah.
a little whale friend.
Yeah. Pycon is literally from the moment that he's introduced, just the freaking coolest character in the world. And especially for a character that is not like human or human adjacent. Like it's essentially at least in this world, for us, if we're comparing it to our world, it's essentially a whale. And like the way that Pyacon is given like depth for a character that's an animal, like to me is so interesting because they yeah, like Pyacon has like a backstory. Pyacon has the ability to communicate with the other characters very clearly. And like if we're gonna get into some thematic stuff, like obviously James Cameron is sending messages through his movie about environmentalism, and specifically in this movie about the yeah, I know, shocker. And specifically in this movie about the ocean, which is something that he's clearly very in love with. And
Wait. You're saying that Big Jim Cameron, James, the Big Jim Cameron,
Mhm.
likes the ocean?
Yeah, only a little bit though. Not doesn't fully
Mr.
commit to it.
Titanic, Abyss, like
Yeah.
Avatar,
Three
Way
documentaries
Water.
about,
Yeah,
like-
yeah,
Yeah. But no, but like it is like kind of like this not that you need proof, like yeah, like you guys just joked about, like of course like it's obvious that he likes the ocean, but at least if you're trying to sell that to other people, like get other people invested in this idea, like what better way to do it than make them care so deeply about this character who is an animal, like living in this very ocean. Like because Pyacon is just given like so much, and like you don't even have to like pre Pyacon backstory introduction, like you're already invested because Pyacon is this gigantic, like technically, like even though supposedly harmless, technically terrifying character, because your introduction to him is that he kills, up until that point, the scariest character in the movie, the
Yeah.
gigantic shark thing. So you're
Well,
like, yeah, you should.
Yeah,
be
second scariest character in the movie. We'll
technically,
get
yeah.
back to it though.
Yeah, we'll get back to those characters, but I'm just talking about the ocean
Yeah. Besides
specifically.
Kate Winslet's Ronald.
Yeah, like no, but it's like he just has an appreciation for bringing like the ocean to life in a way that's like so fascinating to me, because it's like you don't really like, I mean I can't really think off the top of my head like too many narrative movies, at least, that are about the ocean and like what's living in the ocean. But even like if you bring up those movies and like have those conversations, like none of them explore like the ocean the way that this movie does, because he's like sending this message about how deeply connected us as humans are to the ocean. And it's something that like a lot of people
It's
probably
the circle of life.
Yeah, no.
it's yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah,
But it's like, yeah, it's this thing that I like. Again, it's not like some grand idea that like other people aren't aware of, but like, yeah, a lot of people are going to ignore the fact, especially to the degree like how connected we are to the ocean and how dependent we are on the ocean. Like humans literally can't survive without everything living in the ocean. Like we need these things to survive. Like we're nothing without the ocean. And that's kind of like what the grand like the whole way of water thing is, like how the way of water is inside all of us. It's like, yeah, because like we need the ocean. And like it's like Payakan is just this character that's symbolic of it. Like it's he's saying that we need the ocean, and it's like, here's the thing that you should fall in love with to make you care about how much we should care about the ocean. Like,
I read a little thing on Twitter or TikTok, or it might have even been like a longer essay or something. I read something somewhere a little while ago about the idea, and it was talking about it was like a reaction to Avatar, but he was talking about the idea that we should be less empathetic or empathetic towards fish than other animals, right? When really, in reality, we should be more sympathetic for those animals, because fish are killed and hunted in like significantly larger quantities than any other like animal on Earth, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like the fact that we are just like so far removed from like that empathy there, where even like a lot of vegans and vegetarians are like, yeah, but fish are different, you know? Like in like part of their heads where it's like a fish isn't like a cow or a fish isn't like a pig, you know?
Yeah.
It's like that's also like a misguided kind of line of thinking, and it's like, no, it's like these are living things with like feelings still, you know?
Yeah. And it's like it's frustrating too, like when you get into that stuff, because it's like, yeah, like you said, like obviously people view animals in the ocean a little bit differently than animals on land, in terms of like, yeah, let's maybe give these less significance, which is weird on its own, in terms of like whatever you're applying to it, because it's like, yeah, like if your whole thing is like, especially coming from, like you said, like vegetarians or whatever, like if your whole thing is that like you really care about like the lives of these animals and the fact that these are like conscious living things that like you should care about, then like that shouldn't exclude animals who are the exact same way. But not just that, it's like, yeah, like you mentioned, like so many of our ocean animals are disregarded because of the like high numbers in which we kill them, you know? Like a lot like nobody's talking about like hunting whatever, because there's a lot of animals that live on land that nobody is going out of their way to kill, whereas like we kill pretty much anything in the ocean. Like there's really not an animal that's exempt from that, and I think that makes people comfortable with the idea of their death. It's like, yeah, that's fine. And when we're talking about what the actual like effects of doing these things are like on our ecosystem, like you can bring up all these arguments about how harming animals on land is damaging to our environment, but like harming animals in the ocean, like you're talking about animals that participate in a food chain that is responsible for like a lot of like the sources of life on the planet, like a lot of the like yeah, there it is again. But you know what I mean? It's like a lot of the plant-based like things in the ocean are responsible for like a majority of like oxygen on the planet. Like we can't survive without these things. And so like having a functioning ecosystem of like animals in the ocean that all interact in a way that keeps all of this stuff alive, like damaging these things is extremely damaging to us. So it's like this weird perception that people have that like only harming land animals is like what's really hurting us, when it's like, no, like we need the ocean, like all like we can't lose these animals. So yeah, I don't know. That's just like that's a whole frustrating conversation on its own. But
Yeah.
And
the
while this
whale
is
rocks.
happening, right, Spider is still with Quaritch, and Spider has kind of like half given in, and is like obviously because he doesn't want to get fucking tortured again, and he's stuck with them. So Spider is like along for the ride, like half doing his bidding, kind of. And I think the fact that this is how it is like really annoying some people, because he's like, Spider. We haven't even mentioned Quaritch. Colonel Miles Quaritch, played by Stephen
Miles.
Lang. Miles. He's the father of Spider, kind of, because, of course, in this movie he is a clone, which is a weird kind of like whole thing that the movie actually gets into in an interesting and meaningful way. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, Spider's like basically showing his dad around, showing his monstrous Darth Vader dad around, basically for to do stuff. And then like they even Spider shows him the Banshees, and he gets him to like do the Banshees and stuff. And it's that whole plot is also happening on top of like this like amazing water shit.
Yep.
Yeah, that all happens, and then okay, yeah, so that happens. Gonna skip ahead a little bit. We got the
Yeah.
the poachers, the whale guys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
With what's his name? The Australian guy.
Jermaine Clement.
Well, Jermaine
Yeah.
Clement, who's the New Zealand actor from What We Do in the Shadows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's there. He's
Yeah, he's just there.
yeah.
Is he the biographer?
the biologist?
Biologist. Why did I say
Yes.
biographer? That's not even a word, is it, actually? Is biographer a
Biographers-
real
It
thing?
was-
Yeah,
it was close.
Biographers are the guys that write biographies.
Right.
Yeah.
That
He was
is
writing
okay.
Miles Quaritch is the fact.
Yeah, and these
Yeah.
guys just
You
suck.
know
These
what I
guys
meant. You
suck.
get the idea.
But Miles Quaritch and the squad plus Spider, they take one of these whale poacher boats. They go into it looking for Jake Sully because they know that Jake Sully is in the Makaina islands nation tribes, and they go in there. They look for him. They're causing a lot of havoc. And then Quaritch has this brilliant idea of like, let's just start killing the Tokun, which is the name of like the Pelican's race of whales. Let's just kill them right around the islands, because the Navi have the Navi of the water tribe, the Pelican, oh my god, I'm all over the place.
Like,
Yeah, the Makaina
no.
have such spiritual connections with them. Yada yada yada. They'll attack us. That happens. Now we're into the good stuff. This is when the movie starts to get good.
Well, like, it's
Oh.
great. It's already been really amazing, but this is the meat of the stuff here.
Yeah, and I won't even get into like the whole the all of the hunting of these whales, because that certainly circles back to all of the thematic stuff that I already mentioned. Like that's like further proving the point that
Yeah, it's very clear that James Cameron is like, we should not be mean to the sea creatures, be nicer to the ocean. But anyway, like stuff, yada yada yada, stuff happens. Loak fucks up again, and then they end up captured on the ship. We're really fucking skipping ahead, sorry, but
Yeah.
we're flying through. And then Jake Sully has to basically confront them, but Miles is like, or Quaritch is like, you gotta come alone, Jake. And then Jake is like, yeah, I forgot what the voice I was doing. Jake was like, yes, I'm coming. Yeah, and then he starts
he
to
said
go,
something like
yeah. It's like probably like really similar to that.
and you're perfectly building to my favorite part of the movie, by the way.
yeah, and then right, and then he starts coming, but Pelican, who's like swimming around, basically he sees that his little bro Loak is strapped on there, and then what does he do, Kevin? He
He launches out of the water onto the boat and starts literally kicking ass. Keep in mind, this is a fucking whale, dude. Like, this thing cannot even like turn a single degree in either direction, and he hops up on this boat like a beached whale and is just like kicking ass, and nothing is cooler then this like split second, like this really quick scene where Loak pretty much like kicks somebody towards him, and
Oh,
he just
yeah,
like
yeah.
slaps his fin right on top of him to kill him.
That one's
I'm like, that
crazy.
was like, obviously there's a death that happened shortly after that is probably the most like overall
Yeah,
exciting
yeah.
Icon kill, but that little moment where like they do the little teamwork
tag
thing
team.
to kill him,
Yeah.
I'm like, that is so freaking cool. Like Pycon, like this bond is so clear. And I'm like,
Interesting
that thing is
action.
awesome.
Interesting
And
action.
and when we're talking about crowd cheer moments, like that's the one that when
Well,
when
there's another one,
Pycon
but
jumps out
yes,
of the
Yeah,
water,
yeah. That's
like,
one up there. That's a big one.
that's where my crowd lost it. Like this thing jumped out of the water
There are
and
5
everybody's
guys
like
in the-
cheering. Like they're
Yeah, yeah.
losing their shit. So
Yeah, Pyacon fucking does his shit, fucking takes names, starts kicking everyone's asses, and this is where James Cameron actually really starts to shine as kind of like genius filmmaker, genius director, James Cameron, because what he does here, what he does in the third act in terms of like directing action is so above really what anybody else is doing on the same scale because I hate to compare it to Black Panther 2, but listen, because in the third act of Black Panther 2, that final action scene on the water in the boat makes no fucking sense. It is hard to follow. It's super convoluted. It's hard to understand like what the stakes are. But with this, what's happening right now, what's going to happen for the next basically like 45 minutes of
maybe
the
even
movie.
an hour, to be honest.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
good
like
chunk.
it is beautifully like meticulously choreographed. It is super high in action. There's a lot going on still, but you as the viewer understand completely what's happening because it is communicated so effectively, right? It's like these guys are over here doing this thing, these guys are over here doing this thing, these guys over here are doing this thing. You understand what all three groups are like in location to each other. You understand what all of their goals are. You understand like who is fighting them and why and how they could hurt them. You understand everybody, all the relationships, all the dynamics. You understand like it's just very easy to follow. You just get it immediately because James Cameron is so good at directing the camera.
Yeah. I think this is a good time to dive into the one moment that is going to I assume not for me because of how much I love Pyacon, but for everybody else, the one moment that is, I guess, the most emotionally affecting scene in the movie, which is our character death, at least our big character death.
Yeah, the older brother dies, which I another criticism of the movie. You could spot this a mile away, kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's why I didn't want to say it earlier, but that's
Yeah,
also
yeah.
why I bring up the train scene in the beginning, because it's like they're making us pretty aware of the fact that this little brother is rebellious. He has a close relationship with his older brother, and it's probably going to get one of them hurt. Like,
Yeah, and it's also like it's one of those things, even just from like a screenplay standpoint, where the older brother is the only character in the whole movie that has nothing going on. His whole character is just like, oh, I'm the older brother, and I am the favorite, and nothing bad's happening to me, and I get no screen time, and whenever I'm on screen,
You
it is
have-
with the younger brother.
You have like Coop today as well, who's like the littlest, who also has that
Yeah.
kind of like they're young. But I think, even though it is kind of very extremely obvious, I think the fact that it just happens and that we are killing kids in this movie is like James Cameron, as well as like that whole like the guy's arm flying off.
Yeah,
I think
kill the kids.
Yeah, I think James Cameron is like showing that like he has some balls and anything
Yeah.
can kind of happen here. And
Yeah.
like kind of what I was going on earlier, I think if we have to care about in order for us to care about these characters, we need to fear for their lives.
Yeah.
So I think killing him off, and I think we're gonna see some deaths in the future movies. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna go down, and like yeah, that's the most important part with these big action.
and
Yeah.
I think. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say because he dies and the death scene is so dramatic and it's affecting to people like us. Again, I understand why people wouldn't like it. I don't care about those people about this movie when we're talking about this movie though. But yeah, there's people I respect that don't like the movie and that's fine. And I understand why like his death scene would be really corny because they're like whatever, it's manipulation, yada yada yada. To
Yeah.
us, it's all pretty effective. To me, I cried the second time I saw it in theaters. I was so like, man,
Second.
yeah, the second time I saw it in theaters, I cried at that part.
Okay.
And I was like, man, that's so good because Neytiri is freaking out, and but then it kind of transitions, and like the stakes get even higher because it's like, yeah, the boys got free or whatever, and then Korich, we're all over the place, but then Korich like recaptures the daughters, right? And Jake is like, hey, where's your kids? Where are the girls? And Loak is like, they're still like over the dead son, older son's body. And Loak is like, they're still on the ship. And then Jake goes to Neytiri, who is sobbing, like an active like stage 1 of mourning, right?
Yeah.
Like over the loss of her son, right? Her blood and flesh. And like Jake is like, hey, I need you right now, right? We have to go back for our daughters. Like, I need you right now. And then the stakes just like elevate somehow before they explode. Like now, like I think the death of the kid isn't even the climax of the movie. I would argue. Like,
No, of course not. Well, the climax happens like pretty late on, I would say. It's much more like what's happening on the boat, or maybe even after Quaritch's I was gonna say death, but I guess like drowning. Like maybe after he's unconscious, like the climax could really even just be them trying to escape this Titanic. Like,
Great.
there is literally like
situation.
an hour and a half of just like steep rising action. Like
yeah.
like in the latter
And
half of this movie.
The thing that I was going to mention, just to circle back a little bit, is that like what you're saying about the older brother, I think, and how he pretty much isn't given anything. Like what really like cements that scene as emotional is that the other characters are given stuff. So like you kind of care about him by association because you're like, I care about these characters and they just lost somebody who is very important to them. So like when you're thinking about his younger brother or Jake and Neytiri, you're like, I care about this death because I know how it's affecting all these other characters that I care about. So even if it's like technically bad writing in the sense that he's not really developed all that interestingly, like the death still manages to be effective despite that. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I would never criticize the screenplay really and say that it's like a bad an exercise in bad writing, as because I think James Cameron, it's other people have identified the same thing about to say, like that James Cameron is so much more focused on the themes of his movies than he is about the plot. It's kind of like anti-MCU in that way, whereas like the plot is totally secondary to the message, right? And a lot of people have identified that as a negative thing, and saying how like that is like not a good thing that he does that because it's like uninteresting characters or whatever. And to me, it's like no, because it's utilitarian and it's like it's us talking about whales and whatever, you know, like
and also like building on that and the scene that you're mentioning, like the stuff that happens after where they have to go back for their daughters, like that really, like, again, the death itself is sad, but then it leads to pretty much, at least in terms of like acting, the greatest emotional display in the movie, because when they go back to save their daughters, like and of course like that moment between Neytiri and Jake is like so incredibly touching because they're like, hey, we need to focus up and like save the rest of our kids before we have to have more than one of them dead.
I'll reenact it real quick. Where Jake's Sam Worthington goes like,
reenactment.
Hey woman, hey, we need to get your head into the game. We need to go back there. This doesn't matter right now. We need to go back. Get your head into the game, woman.
It sounds exactly like him. I mean, again, there's just really no. I won't be surprised personally if they contact Doug for the third movie.
Yeah, if they ever do like an animated like series, and Sam Worthington's like too expensive. Doug is like here. I do think in that with Neteyam's death, I think it is a big moment for a big switch that goes on in Jake's head, because the whole movie he is kind of running, and you get this bit before like they are still like they're going to fight because trying to save their kids, but this death switches off a switch, and it totally switches off a thing in Neytiri where she kind of loses her mind, and she has this all these really badass scenes that come up in the next like 5 minutes where she's just going like crazy killing people, and
Yeah.
they have completely like it is this like Sully stick together. We're gonna fight for our family because
Yeah.
we lost the team, and we didn't really talk about Zoe Saldana much, but she is phenomenal in this. Like,
Yeah.
especially in this.
She doesn't have a lot to do.
She doesn't have a lot
Yeah.
to do, but
Yeah.
in her limited work, especially in this this like 20-30 minute little bit where she loses the team and then she kills everyone, and
that's what I was getting to as well.
yeah,
with the
she is
emotional
phenomenal.
action part.
She is
Yeah.
so good in this movie, as well as Sam Worthington. As badly as Doug is going to make it sound, Sam Worthington is brilliant in this movie. They're really great acting performances.
Yeah, and that like what I was building up to is that at the end of this like massacre that she goes on,
Yeah.
you see like all of this emotion come out in like just a couple seconds when she like is done killing this last like soldier, and she just like screams in his face, and it's like that's like the emotion that like you can channel back to, and that I appreciated more when I watched it again, because I was like now, and I don't know if this is why you feel this way when because you mentioned that you cried the second time, Doug, but it's like, yeah, now that you know afterwards how much Neytiri is going to respond to this death emotionally, when you watch it a second time, you're like, damn, this is really painful, because like now like how not that it's like any surprise that somebody's going to be sad when their child dies, but you know what I mean? It's like when you watch it that second time, you're like, what's about to come after this. So I like that death was, I think honestly, like I might be in agreement. I cried both times, but I probably cried more the second time because I knew what was about to happen just a couple minutes after that death.
Yes. And then we move on to, we're almost to the end. My favorite set piece of the year. My favorite action set piece. Maybe my favorite action set piece of all time. That's a little. Listen.
High praise.
We're gonna let it cook.
Yeah.
We'll circle back to that in a couple years. But which is like the boat actually sinking, right? When it's like everything. So it's like everything. This is everything that happens after Neytiri basically threatens Spider's life, right? And is like, hey, let go of Kiri.
Great scene.
Yeah, which great scene, right? But then everything after that, right, is maybe like my favorite set piece. It's so fucking good because the boat is just sinking now, and it's so fucking insane. And you kind of get this sense that, and it worked on me both times, but you get the sense that like Jake and family are gonna leave now that they got other kids. But then Courage is like, hey, I'm gonna kill you and your whole fucking family one day. And then you just see like Jake's like look of like, God damn it, dude, like on his face, and he just goes like, what does he say? He says, let's get to it, I think is what he says.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, when he said, but it looks like he's about to leave. The court says that, and Jake just like, let's get to it. And when I tell you, me and my two friends fucking like stood up in the movie theater and shouted our heads off because it was so badass. Oh my god, that's my favorite moment of the whole movie.
Yeah. And I really like the stuff that follows that as well after. Obviously, like, it's weird because for me, like, the tension has maybe even, like, because of, like, the high action points that just, like you said, like, there's, like, an hour and a half of just, like, pure, like, rising tension and action for the whole end of this movie. But I think maybe following, like, what's his name's death and like the fact that this fight has just taken place between the two of them, when it's just them kind of trapped underwater, I'm like, yeah, maybe it's lost a little bit of tension, because I feel like I knew, and I think like maybe you guys are probably in agreement that it's like you kind of know they're going to get out of this situation because they're probably going to save the other deaths for later movies. But yeah, like even then I'm like, this scene still rocks because it's such a cool display of like, hey, this is why, like, this is how much power Kiri has, where it's like you saw it when she manipulated that stuff to kill the characters earlier, but then it's like now she's literally lighting up the ocean and like saving her whole family, and it's like clearly she is like being built up to be like this super important character in the later movies.
Cat Jesus. She's Blue Cat Jesus.
Yeah, essentially. So yeah, I thought even that like part at the end was
Kiri's gonna die for our sins in Avatar 5.
yeah, it's we could we could get into theories, but that could be a whole different podcast. So unless anybody has does anybody have anything extra that they want to add on top of all of this Avatar conversation?
No, I mean, I don't know. It's good. You guys should go see it.
Really, if you've listened to all that, you probably have seen the movie already. Or you just heard the movie.
Literally, if you haven't seen the movie and you listen to that, I'm sure that like most of that didn't even make sense because you did a bad job of explaining it out of the way.
Also, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of brushed over because of just time, but yeah, there's a lot of great scenes that we didn't have time to even talk about.
Yeah, well, we're also talking about a 3 hour.
It's a movie is 3 hours long.
Yeah.
Speaking of movies that are 3 hours long.
Speaking of movies that are 3 hours long, we're gonna take one more break and then we're gonna talk about Babylon in just as much detail.
Hey, Babylon, movie of the year, baby.
Yep. Okay, now we're going to talk about Babylon now that we're done with all our Avatar talk. This is the other big release that's come out in the past couple of weeks. We've all seen it very recently. Everybody knows it's on all of our top fives. Let's just get started by talking about some general stuff then. Maybe let's talk about our relationships to the one Damien Chazelle, who is the director of Babylon. Thoughts on Damien Chazelle, Doug?
Oh, so yeah, people were always really hyping up Babylon, and from last year and like really early in this year, and I was so much like I am not excited about it because Damien Chazelle is not a filmmaker that I was excited to see more from, because my relationship was like I like Whiplash, I love La La Land. I don't know where he goes from there, and actually I kind of got the feeling before I saw Babylon, I was like maybe Damien Chazelle is just like that kind of artist that got every thought in his head out there at once, right? And now he just like doesn't have any more ideas, you know? It's like he had an idea for 2 movies, and that was Whiplash and La La Land, and then he just didn't have any more ideas. But he made those movies, so he was just like, I gotta make more movies. So I'm a filmmaker, and Jesus Christ, I could not have been more wrong in that assessment.
Yeah. Owen, how do you feel about
I've only seen Whiplash up to this point. I think Whiplash is good. I don't think it is as amazing, or even maybe it's great, but it's not really for me as much as I think Babylon is. And I think Damien Chazelle is cool. I am not really in any rush to see his other films. I said to Doug earlier, I thought Babylon was really great, but it didn't make me want to go see Damien Chazelle's other work. But I think what interested me about Babylon was about what people were saying about the film, because it's been a very divisive film. It has a very mixed kind of reviews thing. It's kind of been this film where you either love it or you hate it. And it's also the only kind of Damien Chazelle film that kind of, if I saw that poster, if I saw what like the whatever title card of what it's about, I was like, that's a film I want to see. So yeah, I think it's brilliant, and I like the film.
Yeah. And yeah, at least for me, I'm probably higher on Damien Chazelle than both of you by a mile because I am in love with Whiplash, and I also am like pretty in love with La La Land. Not nearly on the same scale, but I still think La La Land is one of my favorite movies, at least of the year that it came out. But Whiplash to me is like one of my favorite movies ever. So I've always admired Damien Chazelle.
One of these guys.
Yeah, one of those guys.
Come on.
The difference between Babylon is like when I went into Babylon, especially after watching the trailer and seeing the mixed reviews, it's like I already have a sense of what a Damien Chazelle movie might be like because of those movies, and I've seen all his other 3 big movies, and this is just so much like bolder and so like different from what you would expect from him. Like it's so just actually insane that it just subverted all of those expectations. So that's really like that's really affecting. and the craziness like starts literally right away. Like let's just get into the plot stuff and the first rough estimate of like at least 40 minutes where it's pretty much a drive my car situation where the title
Yeah, I was gonna say
the
drive my
title
car.
card- yeah,
This
the
is
title
that
card
big-
does not come up until same thing with RRR. I think the title card doesn't come up until like
Oh yeah,
at least
RR2.
30 minutes into the movie. But yeah, Babylon has this gigantic like introduction where so
Huge
much
set piece.
happens. Yeah. You guys could give your input on it first, Doug. What do you think?
Yeah, certified genius filmmaker Damien Chazelle proves himself with one of the most insanely intricate, crazy set pieces, which is this party at this whatever rich person's house that our protagonist, I would say, probably like firmly our like central protagonist, Manuel, who's played by Diego Calva.
Calvin.
Yeah, who most notably before this film was most notably in Narcos Mexico, I think, or something like that, like the Netflix show.
Well, I didn't even know who Diego Calva was before this movie, and then I see this, and I'm like, this is one of my favorite performances ever.
Yeah, don't quote me because I don't think he's in any other big movies. I think the biggest thing he's in before Babylon was the Narcos TV show, which is crazy. But yeah, Diego Calva, who is basically kind of like he's kind of like the Michael Clayton of the group. He's like the guy that you call to get something done. You know, whenever you need something done, you would call him. But the set piece is fucking ridiculous. And like, it's like bigger than life.
Yeah, I mean, it really pulls you right in from the beginning. You have this big moment with the elephant. There's just a lot of crazy things going on, and it is a film that you really it's not film unlike something you've ever seen before, and then has you with the long runtime being excited for that journey that you're about to come on.
Yeah, I read Adam Naiman's piece on The Ringer about this movie, and in the openings, he references this opening party set piece, right? And he says if you play it at quarter speed, it's basically just Eyes Wide Shut.
yeah. Because it is going so fast, especially with the signature Damien Chazelle like whip hands and all these crazy camera movements, as well as just the amount of insanity that is happening in this big house party.
Yeah. And it's not even like let's just let's just talk about how much this pushes the boundaries of like what is acceptable in an R-rated movie.
Oh, this is an NC-17 movie pretending to be an R-rated movie.
I literally I think I remember turning to my friend like a couple minutes into the movie when I saw like the scene where someone is literally getting pissed on like 5 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
I saw that and I'm like, this is going to be one of my favorite movies of the year.
We're gonna. Gavin knew at that moment that this was.
I was like, I was like, this movie started not even 10 minutes ago, and someone has a mouthful of piss right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to compare that to any other movie you've ever seen, and it's not even like it ends there. Like, this whole party is just like this coked out like mess of just like nudity and like just full blown like craziness, and there's just like, I was trying, at least I've only seen this movie once in theaters so far, but like I was trying at least during this 40-minute like opening sequence to just like try to see everything I could on screen, because I knew as it was happening, I was like, I'm not going to be able to catch everything that's going on right here. But it's so intricate because there's literally like, there's sequences where there's at least like 50 people on the screen at once and they're all doing something. And it's like, there's no way I'm going to catch everything that is happening on first viewing, but it's so interesting how well choreographed that all is, that they're all able to be doing all of this stuff at the same time, and it turns into this final product that is just so chaotic and intense, and introduces you into this movie that is going to be chaotic for the next 3 hours. So yeah, that whole opening sequence was just wild to me. There's just nothing to dislike about that.
It really sets the tone for the whole rest of the movie in a major way.
Because it's like, the thing is, what I mentioned about the trailer is like the trailer doesn't give off what the movie is in terms of like how insane it is.
You really can
And-
show that in a
Yeah,
trailer.
exactly.
Yeah.
So like when I saw this trailer and I was like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna love this, and then the movie starts and someone's getting pissed on like 5 minutes in, I'm like, this was not how
Yeah.
this movie was advertised whatsoever.
And viewer or listener who has not seen Babylon and is like, I don't care about spoilers. Let's one, go see the movie. But two, bro, when we'd say like somebody gets pissed on, imagine this fucking fat ass obese man who is naked laying on the floor, and this like woman who is like kind of disgruntled is like standing over him, right? And the guy is like giggling, and she is just like full like hard like full bladder hard pissing
Yeah.
all over him, like scooting up to his face, to pissing on his face while he's like laughing, and it's
Yeah.
like unbroken shot. It's like
Yeah, he's having the time of his life. He's like, dude, this is the best thing that's ever fucking happened to me. It's just insane. And then you like, yeah, like the eyes wide shut comment makes sense, because then like afterwards, like and it almost doesn't, like, I mean, after you watch somebody get pissed on, it's really hard to compare anything to that.
Yeah.
But then like during this party, there's just like group sex happening on every corner of the screen. Like there's just people just fucking the entire time. Like any scene that's happening, you could find a frame with someone just having sex
Yeah.
in the background. So it's just insane. Like, and this happens for literally like at least 30 minutes, with
Yeah.
with barely any breaks, except for like the couple of moments that Diego Calva's character like runs outside or whatever,
Yeah.
or like when Margot Robbie's introduced or whatever. Like, yeah, there's a couple moments that break it up, but it keeps just circling back to this party where the most insane shit is happening the entire fucking time.
Yeah, and then there's like the only like break really in this first 40 minutes of the movie, which other than this one moment I'm gonna reference, is like kind of like just like 40 minutes of like Damien Chazelle like clapping in her face, you know. Is when Diego Calva meets Margot Robbie's character Lenny, is her name, right? And
Nellie Leroy.
Nelly, sorry, not
Lenny.
Nelly. Yeah, Nelly. Yeah, it's when Diego Calva's character meets Nelly, and he's immediately entranced by her, as we all are by Margot Robbie.
Yeah.
and
greatest.
and they're like kind of talking, and then Nelly is like, "Hey, do you guys have drugs in here?" And then he takes her to this place where there's drugs, right? And she's doing coke, and she's like, "Don't make me do coke by myself." That's the worst Margot Robbie impression ever. But
That's not even like close
Yeah.
at all.
And not to mention, that scene literally introduces like this super epic love story that's going to take place, because
Yeah.
like right after that he like says, and it's subtitled for us because it's not in English, and obviously Margot Robbie's character does not understand it, but like he literally like confesses his love to her like during this opening sequence, and so you know this is just going to be like not only this movie that explores like cinema and all its meaning, but also this movie that is like most likely in Damien Chazelle fashion going to be like this super heartbreaking love story. And it's just like, yeah, as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, so I'm pretty much being set up to
Yeah.
be really upset at the end of this.
yeah, like and during that like that scene that we're still talking about, right? And like she's like, "Hey, don't make me do coke by myself." And he's like, "No." But then he does something a line, and then like they're talking, right? And they're basically their conversation is basically just like a coked up like, "Movies are magical. There's something special about the movies. I wanna live on a movie set, because that's where the magic happens." And I leaned over to my partner, who I went to go see the movie with, and I was like, "This is every conversation I have after 2 a.m."
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Let's transition a little bit, because there's a long section of this movie that takes place on film sets. The biggest being this like pretty much I assume this was, I don't know if it was shot here, but it's at least symbolic of like where most Hollywood movies were shot, in these like desert landscapes just outside of LA, like either in the valley or like some more rural areas of LA.
So, are you
And-
talking about the silent sets or the
I'm talking
sunrise?
about well, technically there, yeah, the silent stuff happens before the transition.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like
They're
the
both silent films, but
all of the silent sets that are pretty much meshed together in one location, and you
Okay.
get so much like cool stuff happening there. Specifically, like for me at least, the most interesting part of all of this like mess of stuff happening. Obviously, like the stuff with Margot Robbie's character is very interesting as well, because she's like coming into her own and being recognized as an actress who, at least in this point prior to the movie, is not famous whatsoever. She gets this acting job by chance because someone else overdoses from drugs in the opening sequence. So she's not even supposed to be here.
Yeah,
and
the
then
girl
she
pissing on the guy is supposed
overdoses.
to be.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's supposed to be the
exactly.
role that Margot Robbie ends up taking.
And I'm sure you guys will mention the Margot Robbie stuff as well, because I'm sure you love that part. But like for me, the part in this whole section that like was awesome was this like just continuous build up to Diego Calva's character like scrambling for a camera, and like the sun is setting, and it's like, we need to capture this now, because like this is the chaos of like being on a film set and like getting a movie made and working with the restrictions like the sun going down. It's like, we need to film before the sun goes down, because otherwise we're screwed. And it's like they literally, he finally like rushes the camera up, and we see the sun like on the horizon, and we know like you got one shot at getting this take perfectly, because otherwise like the movie is screwed. And
they do it against all odds. They get the cake, right? And it's magical. It's fucking magical. And it like, I was tearing up. I almost cried because I was just like, God damn it, Getz movies, dude. That's so magical. Like,
we didn't really even talk about it, but the guy they're shooting on that scene with the thing is Brad Pitt. We didn't even get it to, but Brad Pitt and Spike Jonze is shooting it.
Spike Jonze is like, I need my camera.
yeah. But yeah, Brad Pitt is phenomenal, and we'll get into more of him later. But yeah, Brad Pitt in this like night movie or whatever, which is brilliant.
Am I crazy here? I don't mean to make this correction, but is that Spike Jonze or is that Flea? Because I thought it was Flea.
Flea is one of the other, like the guy who works at the studio.
Yeah, Spike Jonze is a German director at the beginning.
Yeah.
I thought Flea was the German director.
No. Flea is like one of the guys in like the suits that's like he's the guy working to like get, or he's like a producer or something that's working for, because he's working on the Margot Robbie. He's with the Margot Robbie situation.
I'm gonna be honest. In my head, they're almost like meshed together.
Well, yeah, they're just like bald,
because they have almost like a similar appearance, kind of.
Yeah. No, Flea is a different.
That's confusing on my end, but that the Brad Pitt character, we haven't even talked about him.
Yeah,
at all.
not even.
He was in the party scene, but yeah.
I think Doug is the most passionate about this as well, right? Because you, at least from what you've told me, think Brad Pitt is very deserving of all the praise for this movie. And I was in agreement with you where I said, like, if we're talking about award stuff and Brad Pitt is getting Oscar recognition, winning an Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, then even though it's likely not going to happen for Babylon, there's no reason why he shouldn't be getting an Oscar for this movie, because it is twice the performance that his performance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is, at least in my eyes, and I think Doug agrees with me.
Yeah, I'll stand up and say it. It's Brad Pitt's best work. Yeah. It's my favorite Brad Pitt performance on many levels, on a metatextual level, on just like a straight performance level. And actually I feel this way about the Margot Robbie and the Brad Pitt character, where it's like, this movie was literally made for these two guys to play these two characters. It's perfect. Like I live to the point where I can't imagine anybody else play either of their characters.
Which is like weird with the Emma Stone situation.
Yeah, with Emma Stone was originally supposed to play Nellie, or no, Nellie, right?
Nellie Leroy.
Yeah. Nellie Leroy. Sorry.
And not to be that guy, because obviously he's not nearly as famous as either of these two people, but like, I can't really imagine Diego Calva's character being replaced that easily either. Like, he is like perfectly fitting of this character who he's playing. Like, and to me, I kind of love it, because I'm like, and again, it's sad that this movie is, at least so far, underperforming in the box office. So like, maybe he won't get the attention in future projects that he deserves, but like, at least for me, it's like, I love the idea of taking this actor who is relatively unknown in the scope of like Hollywood movies and giving him this huge leading role and seeing him like kill it. Like, he did amazing. Like, I wouldn't really want to replace, even if you're talking about like some of the greatest actors and like some of our favorite actors, like, I wouldn't really want to see them replace Diego Calva's character here. Like, to me at least, was like, I think all three of these actors are so fitting of who they play that it's really hard to see this movie going any other way.
Well, you
Yeah.
talk about like the other characters being born for this kind of role. I think Diego Calva being sadly unknown is like the best. Like if we had anyone that we knew, it wouldn't have worked as much because Diego Calva's character is an unknown person at the start of the movie, and you kind of go on this journey with him. And if we already knew him, if it was some big hotshot actor, we were like, oh, we know that guy. He's not an unknown. We know him. And even though Margot Robbie kind of starts at the same thing, she already has this kind of star energy, and a star attitude that that Margot Robbie has, and Diego Calva being this unknown and this new face is really important to that character.
Yeah. Let's talk about also some stuff, because we're talking about the film set stuff at least, which takes up a big chunk of the middle of the movie. But obviously, a lot of this movie has to do with the transition out of silent films and into movies with characters that we could actually hear talking, and the, at least for me, the biggest crowd reaction in my theater was this super repetitive scene where Margot Robbie just
really
comes
jumping ahead.
in. They do about 9 takes, I think, of the same scene.
Okay, before we talk about this, can I reference one thing that happens right before it, though?
Yeah,
that is like
of course.
This is the thesis statement for the whole movie that I think is like metatextual on the level of like, this is like it's kind of like what it's the question. It's not the question. It's a statement that Damien Chazelle is making with the movie, right? Before we learn about the talkies in the universe of the film, right? Brad Pitt's character is like, he's talking to Manuel, and he's like, we need to redefine the form, right? That's what he says. He says we need to redefine the form, saying how like silent movies are getting stale as a medium. And at the end of the movie, I was like, fuck, dude. Like, that's the question. That is what Damien Chazelle's saying in Babylon. He's saying we need to redefine the form, and he's using this, like, transition to talking, like, a story about, like, transitioning to sync sound movies as the narrative of saying, like, this is what we need to do today. Like, we need to redefine the form. Anyways.
Yeah. And yeah, like in terms of like this scene specifically, I think going back to what Doug said before about the scene that I mentioned where they're trying to catch the sunlight with like the one shot, it's like, it's hard to imagine anybody getting bored during a movie this chaotic, but like specifically people who love movies as an art form and who are like very genuinely invested in movies are gonna get a greater appreciation out of how this movie captures the filmmaking process. And so like he's kind of bringing the audience along in that sense, where it's like, here's a scene where we're gonna do 9 takes in real time for you to watch us repetitively do 9 takes just like you would on an actual movie set. And to me and literally everybody else in my crowd, because again, the movie's underperforming, but my theater was like literally packed, and there was not a single person who was not dying laughing during this scene, because it is like, it's not chaotic in the sense that the opening scene is with nudity and whatever, but it's chaotic in terms of like how much is going on. It makes you feel like the chaos of all the moving parts of a film set, because like you have at least the best comedic part in this whole thing is this guy who's trapped and just like drenched in sweat and keeps coming out, and he's like, I'm literally dying in there. And then you finally get the take at the end and he just collapses out of the box, and I'm like, this is freaking awesome, because there's just so much like they were I mean, my audience was literally laughing at things that, like, to me at least, should be perceived as pretty normal, where it's like Margot Robbie's character like getting frustrated over, you know, lines and like missing her mark and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, this is pretty natural, but it's funny because of how well they blend all of like these moving parts of the set, where it's like you could feel everybody's frustration and trying to get this thing right, and you know how much they're working towards it and how many like little things are interrupting them, like the door being opened and setting off the alarm and all this stuff. Like there's just always something like ruining the shot. And so when you feel like each character's individual frustration, it just makes the whole scene like so effective comedically, because you're like, yeah, this is just, it's just silly how much they have to keep repeating this, and yeah, like that scene just blew my mind. I was like, this is awesome.
Damien
Yeah.
Chazelle's directing really shows his like pace of that film. That moment could be very stale, but that's probably one of the more funny moments in the whole movie. There's a lot of funny moments, but that's a really funny bit, and Damien Chazelle kind of knocks it out of the ballpark there.
Yeah. Doug, do you have anything about that scene that you
Well,
want to mention?
yeah, I was gonna say like because the tension that he builds up like kind of like erupts that erupts with the guy dying and falling out of the thing, is because it's like you have the it's super hot, super quiet, right? Like super quiet, and then like Lenny is like Nelly, sorry, Nelly Leroy. She needs
We'll get it by the end of it.
she needs to hit her marks. She needs to hit her marks, and she's like not hitting her marks, so she feels very like she's like a natural. She's trying to be more of a naturalistic performer, but also you're getting the sense that she doesn't know her lines, right? So you're feeling her stress about being like she's gonna forget her lines, and that you also kind of like the director, like the woman who is the wife of Damien Chazelle. Yeah, but like, and like the woman, you can feel her stress too because she's trying to like orchestrate everything, but she's just like, okay, let's just do it again. And it's just like the tension is all building up. It's so kind of masterfully done. It's such a great, funny scene.
It's just all something everyone's really uncomfortable with because it's their first time doing this kind of film.
Yeah, true. We're gonna move a little. Again, this is a very long movie, but we're gonna move a little bit ahead. And like I mentioned earlier, like this is, despite the fact that it's mostly a movie about filmmaking, it's also very clearly a love story between Diego Calva's character and Margot Robbie's character. And so we don't really need to do plot summary because we're like assuming that you guys have watched this movie at this point. But yeah, obviously, like Margot Robbie gets into this situation after the downfall of her career, kind of, where like if anybody wants to mention this scene where she pretty much just like freaks out on all of like this fancy like high class Hollywood people, like she just kind of goes off on them.
We're talking like we're skipping ahead like 10 years in the movie.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was specifically going to get to the Tobey Maguire section with this, but yeah, like obviously, like we see her whole little tragic type of downfall after we know she has a gambling problem, and her gambling problem gets her in a pretty serious debt. I do want to mention at least about that like freak out scene that like this is a movie, and I think you guys are probably in agreement at least, and I mentioned this with Nope earlier, where like it's a movie that can praise like the filmmaking process and the importance of like movies as a form, like as an art form, but also is not afraid to critique Hollywood as a machine and like all these players involved. And like there's probably not a better depiction of that than this scene where she's surrounded by a bunch of like fake Hollywood elites who are just pretty much disgusting in every way that a Hollywood elite could be disgusting in public. So yeah, like that part of the movie at least is like sends home that whole part of the dialogue for me.
I think that there's an interesting scene that happens before this. Happens in between this scene and the scene that we were talking about previously about on the Seventh film or the talkie set. That also centers around Margot Robbie's character when she is like overhears people talking about her in the bathroom, right? And the people are always like, she's a bitch, bad actress, her dad's even worse, and all this stuff, right? And I was talking to a friend of the pod, John, about this scene, because this is the scene where she fights this fucking snake, and she basically goes up to her dad, right? And she says like, hey, I need you to fight a snake. Basically, the snake now symbolizing herself, right? And she's like, but she's too afraid to like actually fire her dad. So she's like, I need you to go fight a snake, basically saying like, I need to fight you, basically. So then they go out as like big party bus. They all go out to find a snake to fight. Her dad passes out, basically can't fight the snake, right? Because he in her whole life has like been unable to do any kind of sort of like be there and like to do what she needs. So Margot Robbie's character takes it up on herself to be like, I have to fight the snake. I am my biggest enemy, the snake being her. So she goes up and fights herself, and her old self almost kills her, and she needs to get bailed out by other people again. Like what happens this whole fucking movie.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And I also, yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of movie in this movie, but the only other thing that I do really think that, at least like in terms of like scenes that really affected me prior to the chaos that we're about to get into with the Tobey Maguire stuff, is that there's a scene where Brad Pitt's character, his best friend in the movie, commits suicide. And Brad Pitt's
I forgot about
response to this news is maybe like what makes this such a good, like, what's it called, like acting performance for me, where it's like he's so like, I don't know, just the way that he lashes out after finding out about his friend's suicide. And you see, like, again, it's very like toxic and like not a good way to treat his wife, but like you're seeing the frustration let out from like what happened to his friend, and that's like the peak of his acting in the movie for me, at least, because that scene was just like so moving to me.
Yeah, I think that scene is really great. Well, because like, well, before like that, if you want to play out the whole scene, right? Before that happens, he's reading lines for a movie. It's going to be his first like speaking part, right? Like or something like that, you know? Like it's like a big movie that he has to talk in, and he's talking to his wife who's in the theater, and she's giving him a lot of notes, like a lot of pushback, and be like, hey, maybe you could do this better. Have you thought about doing this? This would be a lot better, right? And he's getting like frustrated by that, and then he gets the call that his friend died. His friend, like his only friend, really, like his only friend has passed away, and everybody else in his life has left him, and he lashes out because his wife, again from the theater, and says how like movies are like a low art form, and he's like, basically just takes out his anger on her, and he's like, movies are magical, but it's basically what he's getting at. He's like, movies are fucking magic, baby, but like being angry in a mourning way.
Yeah. Anyway, going to the
Anyway,
yeah, well, you know, we just gotta cover some bases with the stuff later in the movie. What I was building up to earlier is that after Margot Robbie gets into this gambling debt, we go back to the love story at the center of this movie, because she goes and begs and pleads Diego Calva's character to help her get out of this debt. He contacts his friend who he's worked on set with. His friend gets this money that ends up being
fake
not real money, fake movie set money, and takes this money to deliver it to Tobey Maguire's character, who is pretty much like mob boss, whatever you want to call it.
He's so good in this, like in his limited, like I think everyone is phenomenal, but I think for him to be in this role after, you know, not really being in much for a while,
only being in bad movies,
pretty much,
like, you know,
and then kind of stealing the scenes right there and being like a really menacing and interesting, creepy character. I loved him.
And speaking of creepy, I mean, this scene to me is like, and keep in mind, like, I get scared quite easily.
Also, wait,
you know.
wait, whoa! I just got the fucking. I'm seeing the patterns in the universe. Because it's also it's meta. This movie's so fucking meta, because Tobey Maguire famously has a gambling problem. He has a gambling problem and a gambling addiction. Dude,
this is true. Yeah. And I'm curious how much like thought goes into that, because it's like I don't think that's like I don't think that's a conversation that Davians does not want to bring up. It's like yeah, by the way, let me cast you in my movie because you're a gambling addict.
No, but you know what I mean. Like whether or not it's intentional, it's like that connection is still there, and that enriches
of course, yeah. But yeah, there's like, for me at least, like I said, like this is a big year for horror, and there's plenty of stuff that scared me this year. Nothing compares to how absolutely terrified I was during this Tobey Maguire scene, because each level of this, I guess it's a party. Is that what we're calling it? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's an underground party.
Each level of Los Angeles is asshole, as you
that's what it's referred to. That's what it's referred to. But I wanted to give it some kind of more formal name. But yeah, like each level is like, as soon as you show up, it's like the first level with these people fighting and covered in blood, I'm like, okay, this is obviously going to somehow get more intense than this, and this is already pretty intense in terms of violence, so we have to move it into something more intense elsewhere, something other than violence. And yeah, like each level that you escalate is just creepier and creepier until you get to this final level where for me is like I'm literally like in the theater sweating and having a panic attack watching it, because I'm like, Tobey Maguire finds out that this money is fake, and there's a man standing right there who is like 7 feet tall and 400 pounds of pure muscle, and is literally eating live rats, like as part of his diet. And I'm like, there's no way this ends well. Right?
Yeah,
like,
and I think we're like really brushing over things because we're assuming that you've like know the movie and know exactly what we're talking about. Who's down here is like Diego Calva's character is down here because Diego Calva is now an executive at a production company, and they wanted to bail out Margot Robbie's character, and now they're at the pits of hell, basically. Literally, like.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying before about how it's like, we're back to the love story in the sense that like he's doing all this, he's going through all this because he's trying to get rid of the debt that Margot Robbie owes, and somehow, some way, he escapes this 4 layers of
alligator
like
and all,
that he's put into. But now the issue is that because the money was fake and he can't pay this guy back, the only option is this guy's gonna chase them down and try to kill them, and their option is to run away together as a couple to Mexico. And for me, at least, like, there's a strong like romantic connection in this movie, and it's really like captured by like, obviously there's a lot of like little bits in between of them escaping here, like trying to escape, but like then you have this scene where they pretty much like confess their love for each other and like agree to marry each other, and it's just this super like emotionally moving moment for me, because I'm like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, I'm not dumb enough to think that this movie's gonna have a happy ending. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm watching these 2 people confess their love for each other, and I'm like, there's no way this ends well for them too, right? So like that, the fallout of this scene with Tobey Maguire is that it pushes the romantic narrative forward and puts them on the escape, and the stuff that happens during this attempt to escape from them and try to run away is so like emotionally moving for me in a movie that up until that point was really just full of like high comedic moments, and then it transitions to the terrifying with Tobey Maguire, and now we're transitioning into like, I want to cry because I really like this couple, and it's clear that their plan to escape is not gonna like come to fruition.
Yeah, well, because Margot Robbie, her character, she's not really in love with any human being as much as she's in love with, being a star and having fun and being alive,
Yeah. And
so
like obviously you see that when she leaves, when she leaves him, because it's like that's what I mean, where it's like it's this like kind of heartbreaking emotional moment, because like even then I'm like, I want to like, I buy it in terms of chemistry, because like you believe like this chemistry that they have with each other, but like this can't end well for them, and so I'm like, there's not like there's something missing here. And then of course like what happens afterwards is that like when they go back to the apartment to get ready to leave, Margot Robbie just ditches him, and as he goes into his apartment by himself, he comes out and she's nowhere to be found, because she's run away. And that has a lot to do with what Doug just said about how she really just cares less about any one person in this movie.
We didn't even bring up the fact that the Brad Pitt character kills himself, which is
I was gonna get to that, but I didn't want to
thinking about
like
that. Yeah.
do
I
a.
was like, wait, did that we skip that or is that?
No. I want to bring that up, but I didn't want to, I didn't want to just pair it so jarringly with this like beautiful romance that we're talking about. But yeah, let's discuss.
Sorry.
We are talking about the most emotional part of most emotional parts of the movie, so it's obviously needs to be brought up that Brad Pitt's character commits suicide because of the trajectory that his career has taken.
That's my favorite shot of the film. I think just like on a directorial standpoint, where you have the camera and he closes the door and then it opens a little and you have this creature kind of looking through, and you see him walk through the bathroom with the gun, and you just know what's about to happen, and you don't even it's not this heavily like edited like you see it or any, but you just see the little blood or whatever, the noise. I just think that's like the perfect shot there, and it's such a tragic moment that you just know it's coming, and it's just I love how that moment was shot.
Yeah, and sorry, you go.
No, sorry. But because his character, I love the arc of his character takes so much, because it's like it's not like it's something that like is very difficult to pull off in writing, where it's like you understand like why the character is doing it totally, and you feel bad about it, but it's like damn, bro, it's like but you get it because it's like he had for the last few years, like the timeline of the movie, because the movie takes place over like 15 years or something, like 20 years maybe. Yeah, I was like, yeah, it might be like 20 years, but like the movie is like this Brad Pitt character is coming to terms with like the fact that his time is done, and that he can't fit in this, that he doesn't have the same place in this new world anymore, you know, and it's very sad.
Yeah, and I was the thing I was going to bring up because of like how I agree with Owen that like that shot of him when he commits suicide is just like, I mean, as good of a shot as you're gonna get. Like it's literally perfect. And I could be grasping at straws here and just like maybe looking into this like maybe a little too deeply. But I think it's interesting because the movie, that there is a character, the I don't know her name off the top of my head, but the columnist who is like reporting on his career pretty much. Like obviously it's a less important theme in the grand scope of the movie, but like obviously there's like they're talking about the media a little bit here, and like he is symbolically like by slamming this door, like closing the door on his career because he knows he's about to commit suicide, but then the door like opens up a little bit because you know that we see it because everybody else is going to see it because like the media is going to report on him killing himself. Like he's closing the door on his career, but his career's not over yet because we know everybody's going to talk about this thing that he did afterwards, and we get that by the door being left open. Like we get this peek into how this is going to be covered as a news story still, like his the talk about him isn't over yet. And I just think that's really cool. I don't know if that's intentional, but I assume it probably has to maybe a little bit be.
And I think especially with that shot again, I think there's so much directing and these crazy, all these things happening. But I think it's very simple, like saying it's like just a one shot of all this happening, and very much you could see other directors handling this in a different way and having him break down at the bathroom or this big scene or whatever. But it's such a simple and effective, like he is just doing it and it's happening, and you just have this one take of it. You just watch it, and there's not this whole big thing. This film is very maximalist, but this moment is a very minimalist kind of like scene, and I think it's very emotional.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's, because we're already talking about all the emotional scenes, let's jump into the ending parts of this movie, because there is at the end of this movie a scene where Diego Calva's character, later in the future, now separated from the romantic story with Margot Robbie, has his own family, comes back to Hollywood, comes back to the studio that he used to work at after deserting it, and has to hide his
Fleeing,
identity.
yeah,
Yeah, he has to hide his
fleeing.
identity. Nobody knows that he was like this super important person to the studio, and like he's met by a security guard, and he's just like, oh yeah, I used to work here, and that's like that's really the only conversation they have about it. But then he goes and sees a movie in theaters, and we get like this ending sequence of the movie that is going to be the most talked about part of the movie, most likely.
Well, so he goes to see a movie in theaters, and he falls asleep, and then he wakes up, and what is playing is Singing in the Rain on the screen, and he is having a breakdown, and I'm actually, I might cry talking about it. He's having a breakdown because he's watching Singing in the Rain, and it's like literally his life, you know? It's like he is a character in Singing in the Rain. The Brad Pitt is in Singing in the Rain. Margot Robbie. It's like these characters and these like moment and like these scenes in the movie are just like lifted right out of Singing in the Rain, and he is like super emotional because it's like it's lifted right out of Singing in the Rain, but like Singing in the Rain like gets it all wrong, you know, it's like a cartoonish you know fancified version of like his life, and the life of our three characters. And then we transition from that as he's watching it into one of the greatest scenes in the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Which is this montage of the history of cinema, basically. You know, like this visual montage of like all of the important movies through like the Silent Age. I mean, you know, there's Metropolis in it, and it's all happening very fast. It's like Metropolis, it's Intolerance, it's trying to think of other movies he's all in there. You know, Avatar. It goes from
Matrix,
Avatar, The Matrix, Persona. Like it's like these like this montage of all of like the most monumental like historical like movies in the history of cinema, right? Throughout all of history that Diego Calva is watching through like in his eyes at this movie theater, right? And then it like speeds up, and then like it starts to deconstruct into like the RGB, like the certain colors, and the celluloid ripping, and then like the ink like pouring over the screen, and it's like me watching that in the theater, I was having such an incredible out of body experience, and all I could think of afterwards was like, man, like Damien Chazelle understands movies, you know,
and not just like understands them, but understands, like you mentioned, with like how he wakes up to Singing in the Rain, and he's like, yeah, like I'm seeing a lot of myself in this movie, and it's like, yeah, that's like he's pretty much like through this montage sending this point home about like how movies are so much bigger than just like movies. Like it's like our personal connection to it. It's like what we actually get out of it, and like feeling seen by a movie. I mean, I even literally mentioned it in my top 5 list before, where I was talking about Aftersun being like the most like I've personally connected with a movie in years. Like feeling seen in that way has such a big response on people that when you just watch like this montage of like movies just like flashing in front of your eyes, and you like, it doesn't even have like, no matter what movies show up on that screen, obviously these are all like monumental important movies, but it's like you don't even have to have seen any of like these movies. You just have to have seen movies and care about them, and it's like you're pretty much doing your own montage in your head, where it's like, yeah, this is just a reflection of like all of these movies that mean something to me. And like that's just, yeah, I don't know, I just think that's really powerful, because it's like, of course we all, anybody who enjoys movies even a little bit like should connect to them emotionally in some way. So it's like having this like big flash of like everything that matters to you, and even more so to us because of how much movies are a part of our lives. It's like that, yeah, that's really like, I mean, that's never really been like represented that way before. So
yeah, it's so good.
Owen, any thoughts as well? Because I know Owen definitely wants to.
I mean, it's directly kind of tied back into that Brad Pitt conversation with Catherine Watterson, where he's talking about how much this means to people. And then that scene is a very meaningful scene, and it shows all these movies that, while you might not have seen all these movies, there's probably a movie up there that means something to you. And then just film itself. And I think it's a really powerful scene that kind of sets the whole scene up, like sends the whole scene home. Like it really ends it on this really high moment that is going to be an iconic moment for years to come on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen. We've said it. I've said this many times. Babylon feels like a movie that was made by somebody that was having a panic attack. Um, and I think that that movie is a very good one.
Yeah. I think I think we're all in agreement that Babylon's a good movie. Does anybody have anything else about any of the movie in its entirety that they want to say that wasn't covered?
Randomly, I was gonna try to bring this up when the whole snake thing happens, but Eric Roberts playing Michael Robbie's dad, I think is also like kind of freaking genius casting. As like small as his role is, I think he's brilliant in that, as well as everyone else. But I think I love Eric Roberts, and I think he is great in that role.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in agreement. Doug, anything else?
Cinema
wanna
good, Hollywood bad. We need to redefine the form.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, preach. All right, yeah, that wraps up our Babylon talk, and that wraps up our entire first episode. If you made it this far, you're probably a certified crazy person, but so is Damien Chazelle, so it all checks out.
This is kind of like the Babylon of podcasts when you think
Yeah,
about it.
exactly. In
Well,
a way.
we talked
in a way.
about 2 3-hour movies, so the podcast in like that kind of manner had to be 3 hours long.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we hope everybody enjoyed, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah.